People sometimes ask me what it's like being a park ranger. I have to admit, it's a dream job for the most part. I work as a wilderness ranger, and that means I get to go it alone with little to no supervision, wandering Yosemite National Park by myself. I look for ways to restore nature to its proper state. I try to keep the park looking the way it's supposed to, pristine and beautiful, just the way it has been since long before humans were around to be disruptive. If you asked me what I was looking for, I'd be hard-pressed to say it out loud. I just know it when I see it. The telltale signs of human activity that indicate a camping party has visited an area recently. People will often rearrange logs, rocks, or a fire pit. They'll leave trash lying around, half-burned sticks used for roasting marshmallows, and other signs of their presence scattered about. Hand-dug latrines, holes filled with cigarette butts, and all sorts of crude words and phrases carved into trees. I've seen things that make my eyes water as a lover of nature and the untouched wilderness. My job is to correct their mistakes where possible, returning the wilderness to its natural form so that the next person to come along doesn't have to shed a tear at the sight of a forest slowly deteriorating with each subsequent visit. I think my job's vital. I'd hate to consider what this place might look like without people like me. But every once in a while, even someone as experienced as me can make a mistake. And that's exactly what happened. I made a terrible mistake. And now the wilderness I've always sought to protect has turned against me. I'm not sure if I'm going to get out of this alive. My uncle was the one who first told me about fairy rings. If you're ever walking alone through forests and you stumble across a ring of mushrooms and it looks too perfect, don't touch it, he said to me once. Those rings are made by fairies, and if you disturb them, they'll come after you. You might have bad luck, or even worse, you could fall into their world and become trapped there. Uncle Bill had worked as a park ranger in his younger days, and he had lots of great stories about working at Yosemite National Park. Maybe that was partly why I wanted to get into this line of work when I was younger. He told me and my older brother plenty of stories based in fact, but also quite a few based on folklore and legends, and some that he pulled straight out of his ass. Those were usually the best ones. It was often hard to tell the truth from fiction, at least for me. As I got older, I learned that many of the stories my Uncle Bill told me were fantastical lies, but I never held that against him. He made the world into a wild, hilarious, magical place for me from an early age. I remember he'd sing songs while playing his acoustic guitar around the campfire, making up the funniest lyrics I'd ever heard as he went along. To my young mind, it was like magic, even if he was just replacing the lyrics to Candyman with Candy Dog. To me, it was mind-blowing. Weird Al had nothing on my Uncle Bill as far as I was concerned, and I'll never forget that feeling of walking through the forest with him, marveling as he explained the subtleties of nature and believing in all the hidden things he told me about, real or not. Of course, as an adult, I didn't believe in magical things anymore. Fairy rings were not made by fairies. They were natural, although there were competing theories on how they came about. I had learned in college that it was a biological process. There's plenty of folklore around these odd-looking mushroom circles, but none of it is based in fact, or at least so I thought. But then all of that changed. Recently, I came across a ring of mushrooms in the forest. It looked too perfect and organized. In the back of my mind, I recalled the advice from my uncle, but I no longer took it seriously. I reminded myself that he'd always loved to tell me tales of magical, fantastical things. That didn't mean they were true, though. Once, when I was a small child and we were canoeing, I was getting tired and wanted to go back. He told me that if we just kept going on this particular lake, there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken just up ahead. I pretended not to believe him, but a little piece of 8-year-old me had been genuinely curious if we would find the Colonel and his secret blend of herbs and spices located on a floating restaurant dock just around the next bend. Even though I didn't believe this ring of mushrooms was made by fairies, I didn't want to disturb it. It looked surreal and beautiful, all the way out here in the middle of the forest. I just stood and admired it for several long moments. A sound came from behind me, startling me, and I spun around to see a deer in the woods just a little ways away. For some reason, I decided to take a picture of it and set my backpack down to get out my phone. I was looking down as I unzipped the bag, and when I looked back up again, I was shocked. The deer was just a few feet away now, standing right in front of me. I backed up instinctively and felt the large mushrooms crush underfoot as I did so. The deer reared up on its hind legs for a second, then turned around and disappeared into the forest again. My heart beating too fast, I looked down. The once complete circle of mushrooms was now a lazy arc with a mashed up pile of brown mush at one end. "Shit," I said out loud, looking down at the gunk on my boot heel. I scraped the mush off my shoe on a nearby rock, feeling suddenly nervous for reasons I couldn't understand. Why did I feel like I had broken some law? Like I had just grievously injured an innocent person? I hated disturbing nature in any way, hence my chosen profession. So I chalked it up to a feeling of guilt for trampling a beautiful ring of mushrooms. Looking around the forest, I tried to ignore the feeling that there were eyes watching me. Was Mother Nature silently judging me from all around? Or was that just my imagination? "Sorry, fairies," I muttered, picking up my backpack and moving on from the circle of mushrooms that was now a horseshoe and a brown splatter on one end. I started moving again and looked up to see a storm was rolling in. There wasn't one predicted, but the weather around this area could be random at times, and it wasn't the first time the meteorologists had been wrong. I figured I should start heading back toward the ranger station, so I turned around to go back the way I had come. There was no trail in this part of the forest. It was all navigated by landmarks and compass. I knew I had to head north and travel back up the slope, and eventually I'd find my way to the top of a ridge. From there, I would make my way back down toward a hiking trail. The cliffs far off to the east would serve as a constant marker. As long as I was within sight of them, I knew the park so well I could picture it all in my mind's eye. Plenty of thick forest lay in my way between here and there, but it was easy enough to navigate if you knew how to keep a straight line. I started walking, picking up the pace when I heard a rumble of thunder heading my way. The storm was moving in very quickly, and a cold breeze rushed through my hair and chilled the back of my neck, as if to confirm this. After 15 minutes of walking steadily uphill, the wind was picking up even further, causing branches to come crashing down from the trees. The towering wooden columns were swaying violently all around me. It made me feel very nervous that something could fall down on me from above. Weirdly, the ground began to slope downwards. That didn't seem right, so I paused for a second to check my compass, but it was missing from its usual spot, where I had attached it to my belt. Weird. It had only been there 20 minutes prior. Reaching my other hand down to feel for my radio, I noticed with increasing panic that it was gone as well. My heart began to beat a little faster as I looked through my bag and all my gear, trying to find these two crucial pieces of equipment. I never left the ranger station without either one. I continued moving in what I thought was the right direction, hoping I was just remembering the landscape wrong. Maybe there was a valley before the ground sloped upwards again? I had been mistaken before about things like this, and I usually found it was best to just go with my gut. The problem was my gut wasn't sure anymore. I knew this was the right way, but my eyes weren't matching my sense of direction. I checked the moss on a nearby tree, and it confirmed my internal compass. Still feeling uneasy, I continued moving along, going deeper and deeper into this part of the forest, into what looked like a dark valley. As I walked, I began to see things that didn't make sense. Plants that I'd never seen before. Mushrooms in various shades and colors, ranging from greens to reds, yellows, and oranges, even a few that were blue with yellow polka dots. I came upon 3 snowy white mushrooms that were so tall and broad, they were as big as a child. They stood at waist height and swayed as I approached, as if aware of my presence. I'd never seen anything like them and wondered if I'd accidentally ingested some sort of hallucinogen when I stepped on that fairy ring. Or maybe I fell into their world, another voice in my mind said, sounding like my Uncle Bill. No, that's impossible, I muttered to myself. This is impossible. The clouds above were turning black with approaching rain, and that chilly breeze came again, running cold fingers through my hair. I spun around at the sound of movement behind me, terrified of what it could be. I reeled backward, my eyes wide, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. There was no one behind me, but something was very different. The trees had moved. Several large firs were now blocking my way completely, standing next to each other in a way that did not even remotely resemble the way trees grow. They were shoulder to shoulder, with no room for root growth or for light to come through. It occurred to me after several minutes that there was only one thing that could have happened. The trees were moving. They were alive, and they were surrounding me, cutting off my escape. I spun around and ducked away from the huge white swaying mushrooms as they swiveled, their huge caps turning like heads to watch me go. My legs feeling like jelly, I began to run faster than I'd ever run before, racing through the forest, going deeper and deeper into this dark, uncanny valley. Birds called from the trees above, their songs unfamiliar and strange. I began to see flowers and other plants that seemed to be watching me as well, just like the mushrooms and the trees. And I realized the forest was keenly aware of my presence. The trees were allowing me through, making a path for me, as if this was the way they wanted me to go. I didn't know where I was running to, just that I needed to get away from those moving trees and the mushrooms that seemed to be watching me. But things were only getting stranger as I moved deeper into the forest. Finally, the ground leveled off and the trees parted completely to reveal a river inlet. Towering cliffs stood on either side of the water, going straight up more than 100 feet. There was a hollow half log of driftwood floating on the water, looking to me very much like a raft. I turned around to see the trees had closed in, blocking my exit. There was only one way to go, forward. Up above, the skies were dark and swirling, and rain began to pour down, drenching me completely. As I climbed onto the log, I let my legs hang off either side and straddled it as the river began to swell. A few seconds later, I was drifting downstream on the buoyant log. It seemed like this whole area of the forest was one giant hive mind. It was guiding me somewhere. No, it was taking me somewhere. As I drifted along the stream, the current picked up speed until it was a quickly rushing river. Rapids and whirlpools tossed me up and down and spun me around, setting the log tilting and tumbling over rocks and waterfalls. My legs scraped against stone and were cut on their sharp edges. Several times I lost my grip on the slick wood in the rain and nearly went headlong into the rapids. The water began to calm slightly, and I looked up to see there were now caves dotting the cliffs, looking down on me from above. Black holes pockmarked their sheer vertical walls, like doorways into the unenterable homes of creatures that dwelled impossibly there. There was no discernible way to get up to those dark entrances, and yet I saw multiple red glowing eyes looking out at me from each one. This forced my mind to imagine the type of creature which could dwell in such a gravity-defying abode. I imagined humanoid chameleons, giant lizardmen, scaling smooth vertical walls of granite, climbing the stone as if they had suction cups attached to their hands and feet. Shuddering at this mental image, I just hoped those creatures weren't hungry and that they wouldn't decide to come down to the river to greet me. Their glaring eyes watched me as I drifted along, and I was so distracted by them that I didn't even notice the gravel shoreline coming up. Unprepared, my momentum threw me from the log, and I went tumbling onto the rocky shore. I stood and looked up to see I was just outside a cave. It stood before me ominously, and I heard a strange noise coming from inside. This made me curious, and I found myself taking tentative steps into the cavern. As my eyes adjusted, I saw there were steps leading down, carved into the rock. The wet stone dripped with moisture, cold water landing on my head and my hands occasionally. It was still pouring outside. It was nice to be out of the rain, although I was still more than a little frightened. "They'll want your eye," a voice said from the shadows, causing me to jump. "Who's there?" I yelled. "Just one will suffice. But if one is better than the other, you'd better give them that one and not the other." I spun around at the sound, looking for the source. "Down here," it said, and I looked to see a small rabbit. Its eyes were red, its fur white, and albino. "What did you say? How are you talking? You're a rabbit." I objected, as if this were the least sensible thing to happen to me today. "There's no time for this. The longer you stay, the more you're going to lose. Don't ask questions. Just do as I tell you." The bunny was as insistent as it was cute. I was reminded a bit of the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. The comparison seemed very apt at this moment. I just hoped this rabbit could lead me out of here. "Oh, okay," I said. "I'll trust you." "Good," the rabbit said. "Listen closely. You've desecrated a sacred place, the fairy ring." I tried to interrupt, to say I hadn't meant to, but he shushed me and continued. "It doesn't matter if you meant to or not. That was up ahead. The ones tasked with protecting this place, you must make it up to them. And there's only one way." I thought about his first words to me, my eyes. "They want my eyes." No, just one eye. You can pick, like I said, just so long as one isn't noticeably better than the other. I tried to protest again, but he was already hopping away, his little fuzzy white tail the last thing I saw before he disappeared into the shadows. "Great," I said to myself when he was gone. "Just an eye, that's all." I made my way down the stone steps and deeper into the darkness. Fire spouted from torches up ahead, leading me toward a raised platform where figures stood waiting for me. As I got closer, I saw what they were, giant toads, each one as large as a Volkswagen Beetle. Their eyes were strange and faceted like mosquitoes, dark and reflective as polished jewels, staring intently at me as I approached. Their glaring eyes lacked any emotion. It was like a panel of judges, I realized, as I marched into the midst of them. They looked at me coldly for several long minutes until I wondered if they were waiting for me to do something. "They'll want your eye," I remembered the rabbit saying. That was insane. I wasn't going to give these monsters my eye. For what? Stepping on a few mushrooms? I scoffed at them and turned around to leave, but found myself face to face with cold, wet stone. The cave had shrunk, and it was now only this small room, just barely big enough for me and these 5 enormous toads. They stared at me with blank eyes. "What do you want from me?" I asked, raising my voice to ask them again. When they didn't respond, finally one of them did something different. It glanced down at the cold stone floor of the cavern. I followed its gaze to see a sharp rock, like a broken piece of graphite. I found myself reaching down to pick it up. "No, I can't," I said. But the longer we stood there, the more it became apparent that I would have to. The stink of the toads and the damp chill of the cave was becoming oppressive. If I wanted to leave, I would need to do what the rabbit said. Somehow, he had known, as if this was the way it was meant to be. Time passed. I debated and pleaded with them. I got down on my knees and cried, but they never blinked an eye. Finally, after what felt like hours inside that cave, I decided I had to do it. I realized there was no other way. My heart pounding with terror, I lifted the sharp stone to my left eye and watched as the toads began to nod their oversized heads, their wide mouths stretching into even wider grins. I dug the point of the stone into my eye socket and began to pry and twist, thrusting it deeper until my vision clouded with darkness and red. The pain was so bad I had to stop several times. My knees buckled as I almost passed out from the agony. Slippery gore made it difficult to find purchase, but after several attempts, I finally managed to leverage the eyeball from its socket. Twisting and digging, it came out the rest of the way and fell, dangling from the tendon like a tether, swaying and spinning as it hung from my ruined face. One of the toads snapped out its tongue and grabbed hold of the eye, yanking it backward toward itself and tearing the tendon in half in the process. The pain of that was terrible, somehow worse than anything yet. Gasping for breath, I dropped the blood-slick stone to the floor of the cavern, bending over at the waist, trying to keep my lunch down. I felt queasy and sick about what I had just done. A terrible feeling blowing up inside of me that I was now broken, that I had just lost some essential part of myself. Like when you lose an adult tooth or sever a finger with a table saw. I was not going to get that eye back. It was gone forever and was now being digested in the belly of a great mythological toad. I blinked my one remaining eye, and when I opened it again, I was standing back in the forest with my boot in a puddle of squashed mushrooms, the fairy ring. I was standing half inside and half outside of it. I took my foot out of the circle, feeling the warmth of blood running down my face from my missing eye. Looking up at the sky, I saw it was clear and blue, with no indication of the storm I had witnessed earlier. There were no more dark clouds, no more crashes of thunder. It was as if the whole thing had been a daydream, if not for the fact that I was missing my eye. I had no doubt that it was necessary for me to leave that place. If I hadn't done what I did, that other world would not have let me go. If not for the rabbit and his advice, I never would have escaped. I made my way back to the ranger station. This time, the hill sloped upward the whole way, just as expected. At the top, there was a ridge with cliffs in the distance, guiding my way back home. When I got back to the ranger station, there was only one little problem. My boss acted like I didn't exist. At first, I thought he was upset with me for some reason. I tried to talk to him calmly, but eventually resorted to yelling and screaming in his face. Nothing I did seemed to make a difference. It's like I was invisible to him. My other coworkers, my friends, and my family, none of them could see me anymore either. I've gone to see everyone I know, and they all act like I'm a ghost, like I never even existed. My landlord moved my things out of my apartment, put new locks on the door. Ever since that trip to the fairy world, or whatever that place was, I've been invisible to everyone. I'm a ghost. I can still use my phone, at least until it gets shut off for non-payment. So I've been doing some research on fairy rings in particular. From what I've learned, there are lots of legends and myths surrounding them. But one caught my attention. Some say that if you wander into a fairy ring, you'll be transported to another world, and that you can only escape by giving up an eye to the guardians of that world. The guardians look like giant toads with the eyes of insects. Other legends say that if you wander into a fairy ring, the magical creatures of the forest will trap you there, or make you disappear so that no one can ever see you again. I think somehow I got the worst of both curses. I'm scared that this may never wear off. Whatever the spell is, it may be permanent. They'll want your eye, the rabbit had told me. Just one will suffice, but if one is better than the other, you'd best give them that one and not the other. My left eye has always been a little worse. I was so used to it, I'd forgotten. It completely slipped my mind that my contact lens prescription was just a little bit stronger on that side. I wonder if somehow the toads knew. I'm going back out to the forest to try to make another deal with them. I'll give them anything, even if it's my other eye. I'd rather be blind than invisible. You have no idea what this is like. It's worse than death. I just hope I can find my way back to the fairy world and then back out of the forest again. I'm leaving now after typing this out. If you don't hear from me, you'll know where I am. I have a funny feeling I'll be missing both eyes pretty soon. But I'm okay with it. I have peace with nature, and nature has a piece of me. There is something dangerous at the Dyatlov Pass. It was my dog who saved my life at the Dyatlov Pass. Rambo, that's his name. I was the one who trained him up for the K9 unit when he was still a pup. The station got him from a place called Angel Shepherds. It was a kennel that specialized in breeding guard dogs. and he really was a godsend. That dog saved my life more times than I can count. He was the best partner I ever had back in the force. And when a stabbing forced me into early retirement, Rambo was with me every step of the way. He wouldn't work with anyone else. So the precinct let me take him home. Since then, it was just me and him. Ever since I retired, I kept to myself. All my friends were still active duty cops, and they didn't get a lot of time off. So I didn't really have anyone or any reason to get out of the house. The only times I left my place was to take Rambo out on his walks. Things went on like that for months. When Lonnie called about the trip to Dyatlov Pass, I was knee-deep in self-pity and beer bottles. "It'll be good for you, Nick. Just like old times, except with more snow and less paperwork," he said. I could always count on Lonnie to say the craziest thing you ever heard. So that's how I ended up in some Russian village in the middle of nowhere. Apparently, that village was there even before the Dyatlov Pass got its name. Nowadays, they make their living selling supplies to the tourists headed out to the pass. I checked to make sure we had everything we'd need. Andre, the tour guide, was filling up the snowmobiles. Lonnie was hooking up the sled with all our stuff to one of the snowmobiles. Our plan was to spend the night camping near where those hikers died, and Andre seemed more excited about the whole thing than me and Lonnie were. He said it was extremely rare that people are allowed to stay there overnight. The villagers refused to sell enough supplies for trips like that, something about how it's too dangerous. But recently, they've started warming up to the idea of letting people stay the night. Only for small groups, though, and the conditions had to be just right. Lucky us, I guess. Now, the ride up to the site actually was a blast. The view was gorgeous, in a harsh kind of way. Even Rambo looked like he was having fun from his spot on the sled. It felt great to be moving again. It was the happiest I've felt in a long time. I did hear about what happened to those Russians that died here, but I didn't really care about that. In fact, I could almost forget I was going camping on the other side of the world. Out there in the mountains, it almost felt like I was back in Colorado. Back when me and Lonnie used to go on hunting trips together. I felt like I was part of something again. By afternoon, we were setting up camp. Rambo was off leash and sniffing around. Andre and I started with the tents. Meanwhile, Lonnie gathered wood for the fire. "Hey, Nick, remember that time you forgot to stake the tent? The thing almost carried us down a canyon." Lonnie's laughter cut through the crisp air. Yeah. Just make sure your stew won't give me food poisoning this time," I answered back. It was just like old times. But as the sun began to dip, Rambo started acting up. He'd sniff around our tents and let out a growl. Andre noticed too. "Your dog senses something," he said, his voice serious. "Animals often do, especially here. The land, it is not restful." Pretty soon, it was completely dark out. We gathered around the fire, but the cold continued to bite. But at least the food smelled good. We had a stew going on the portable stove. Me and Lonnie were happy to catch up while we waited for it to cook. But then Andre pulled out his compass. It was an old-fashioned piece on a long silver chain. Andre liked to say it was his good luck charm. But as he fiddled with it, a puzzled look crossed his face. "Look at this thing," he said. Instead of pointing north, the needle won't stop moving around. Andre waved it from side to side, and we understood what the compass was doing. It was following Rambo. He hasn't calmed down since we set up the tents. Every few minutes, he'd sniff around the camp and growl, and everywhere he went, the needle followed him. "It's just the mountains messing with the compass, right?" I asked. Andre shook his head. "Something's not right. We're heading back first thing in the morning. It's too risky at night. But we're not staying here any longer than we have to. Stay in your tents tonight. Keep your radios with you at all times. Don't leave for any reason." We ate our dinner quickly that night, and right after we cleaned up, everyone headed straight for their tents. Except for Rambo. He whined by the entrance of our tent, and when I tried to go in, he grabbed my sleeve to stop me. "Rambo, hey, come on, bud, let's get some sleep." "We'll leave soon, promise." I said as I tried to calm him down. But he wouldn't back down. I had to carry him into the tent. He eventually settled down and curled up next to me. With his warm fur next to me, I fell asleep instantly. But it didn't last long. I heard something in my sleep, and it jolted me awake. At first, I thought it was Rambo whining again. But as I came to, I realized it wasn't him. It was something else. It was music, coming from outside. It sounded like some kind of flute, but low and buzzing, and it sounded close. I reached for the radio to check in with Lonnie. Maybe he was messing around, trying to lighten the mood from earlier. "Hey, Lonnie, that's you playing the pipes?" I asked. There was a pause before Lonnie's voice came through. "What are you talking about, Nick?" "No, man, I was asleep." "So you don't hear music coming from outside?" I asked. "You think there's someone out there? Maybe it's Andre, but this ain't the time for a concert." I switched channels and called him up. He sounded groggy when he finally answered. I told him about the music and how it's still playing. Andre's voice came through clearly. "Nick, I don't hear anything. I'm just here in my tent." I checked back on Lonnie. "All clear on my end," he said, and then a third voice came through the line. "Checking in," it said. I froze. Rambo started barking, his tail between his legs. And then the music burst out through the radio. It filled the tent. It sounded much clearer than it should be. I tried to shut the radio off, but the song kept playing. Rambo howled, mixing with the notes. I flipped through the channels to get it to stop, but it was no use. It played from every channel, even the ones for my friends. I threw the radio down, trying to smash it. Rambo pounced the moment it hit the ground. He chewed on that thing like he wanted to tear it apart. Then, just as suddenly as it all started, the music stopped. I couldn't hear anything outside either. I stepped out of the tent. I needed to check on Lonnie. The cold wind was like a slap to the face. I looked around and saw footsteps around my tent. They overlapped one another, like someone was walking in circles. And those prints, they weren't made by boots. They were bare feet, going round and round in the snow. I suited up and got my flashlight out. Whoever this was, we can't let it pick us off one by one. All three of us would have to stick together. We'd sleep in shifts if we had to. Andre's tent was the closest to me. I started to walk over, Rambo following close behind. I was halfway there when I saw movement in the corner of my eye. I looked around and saw a glowing red light coming from the trees. It almost looked like a flare. Was that the person playing the flute? Was it actually some sort of distress signal? But as I watched, the light suddenly shot up. But instead of flying up like a normal flare, it stopped just above the trees. It hung in the air, like it's dangling from a string. But I couldn't see anything it could be attached to. And then a second red light floated. It came from deeper in the forest. And then a third and a fourth. More and more red orbs appeared, and they all stayed just above the tree line. It looked like the whole forest was covered in Christmas lights. And then all at once, they zoomed across the sky. The lights danced over my head in a pattern I don't understand. They moved faster and faster. I started feeling sick as I watched them, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. Before I knew it, the flute music had started up again. They seemed to dance to the song. The music got faster and the lights started pulsing. I could feel something wet dripping from my nose. And then Rambo bit me. The pain snapped me out of it. I buried my face in his fur to block everything else out. "Good boy, Rambo," I mumbled out. Then as suddenly as it began, the song stopped. I looked up and the lights were gone. The campsite was as quiet as before. How the hell can Lonnie and Andre ignore all that? Why couldn't they hear the song? I knew I didn't imagine all that, because Rambo reacted to everything like I did. But I needed to be sure. And then Rambo growled low in his throat. He barked at Andre's tent and tried to steer me away. I saw the side of it bulge outwards, like someone fell against it. Then I heard muffled shouting. The tent shook like Andre was fighting to get out. I ran over and I heard a second voice coming from inside. There was Andre, swearing in Russian. The second voice laughed and said something back. I pulled at the zipper and it wouldn't move. Then a woman's voice rang out. The tent bulged out again as Andre pushed through the fabric. I took out my knife to cut the tent open, but I couldn't slice through it. The knife slid over the fabric like it was made of wood. I pressed the tip to my palm. It cut me easily, but every time I tried it on the tent, nothing happened. I could hear more voices inside the tent now, all speaking over one another. The voices were a mix of men and women, and for a second, I thought I even heard a child in there. "Andre, it's me, Nick. I'm outside. I'm trying to get you out," I shouted over the noise. All at once, the voices stopped. The tent stopped shaking. "Nick, the one with the dog, yes?" Andre said. His voice was hoarse and weak. "Yes, we're both out here. Me and Rambo. We'll get you out," I shouted back. "Nick, they don't like your dog." Suddenly, the tip of a knife pierced through the fabric. It cut through the tent easily. Andre pushed himself through the tier. His hair was a mess and he didn't have a shirt on. His body was covered in fresh cuts. His face was a mess of bruises. His eyes locked on Rambo. I didn't even think. We landed on the snow as he swung his knife. That's when I heard him. He was humming, and it was the same melody that the flute played. I grabbed his wrist before he could take another shot at me. He hummed louder, his eyes bulging out. He grabbed my neck with his other hand. Then Rambo's jaws clamped on his arm. The dog shook his head, tearing it off my neck. But Andre didn't seem to notice. He continued to hum that song over and over again. Then he managed to throw me off of him. Rambo still held on. Blood leaked into the snow. I made a grab for the knife. I'm not going to let him hurt my best friend. And then out of nowhere, Lonnie knocked him out. Andre crumpled to the ground. Lonnie stood over him, a rock in his hand. "What happened here, Nick?" "Woke up from all the noise. When I looked out, it's like WrestleMania out here." I didn't really have an answer, but something he said stuck with me. "How long you been asleep for, Lonnie?" I asked. "I don't know. Think we turned in at 7? "You didn't answer your radio when I called earlier?" I insisted. Lonnie shook his head, looking confused. "Lonnie, I don't know what's going on, but something's screwing with us out here. It messed with our radios. There's footsteps all over camp. Our tour guide almost killed my dog. We gotta be careful," I explained. Together, we dragged Andre to the middle of camp. While Lonnie tied his legs together, I went to get him a shirt and coat. He tried to kill me, sure, but that didn't mean I wanted him to die in the cold. But the inside of his tent was a mess. His stuff was scattered all over the place. He'd opened up all his food packs and smeared everything on the floor. His radio was smashed open. I found him a shirt that wasn't covered in gravy. Next to his sleeping bag was his coat. I got back just in time. Andre looked like he was about to wake up. We dressed him as quickly as we could, but the arm that Rambo had clamped on was a bloody mess. It was so mangled I could see bone. All we could do was loop the rope around him and tie him to the sled. Andre's chest heaved. He was breathing fast now. He opened his eyes, and they darted around until he saw Rambo. That set him off again. He struggled against the ropes. His ruined arm flopped against his side, and then he began to sing. I didn't understand the words, but they sounded angry, and the melody was still that same flute song that started all this. Lonnie took off his cap and used it to gag Andre. Lonnie suggested that we should take turns watching over Andre. I nodded. That made sense. I looked at my watch. It was just a bit past midnight. We agreed on 2-hour shifts until we can leave at dawn. Lonnie volunteered to take the first watch. He thought taking Rambo away would calm Andre down enough for him to bandage up his arm. I glanced back down at our tour guide. He kept singing, even with the gag on. But something had changed about his face. He wasn't angry anymore. Instead, he looked downright terrified. Lonnie just shrugged and got the fire going. I headed back to my tent. Rambo followed my lead. I got into my sleeping bag, but he stayed by the tent flap, ears up. I tried to get some sleep. But I couldn't forget the look in Andre's eyes when he looked at Rambo. I've never seen that much hatred on someone's face before. But I'm not going to let anything happen to my boy. I must have dozed off after all, because I woke up to my dog licking my face. and I could hear a faint rustling sound coming from outside. Rambo's ears were twitching too. With a deep breath, I grabbed a flashlight and put my coat on. The moon shone brightly. The fire Lonnie started had been put out, and the campsite was completely deserted. Andre and Lonnie were gone. I swept my light around, trying to figure out what happened. Multiple footprints covered the ground, all different sizes. Some of them showed bare feet walking around. Others were boot prints. A few of them were tiny, the size of a child. There were some that looked like hands, as if someone walked around on all fours, and some of them I don't even recognize. I walked over to the sled where we stashed Andre. There was nothing there except bloody pieces of rope. A trail of blood led from the sled to the nearby woods. So that was Andre. But where was Lonnie? I called out his name, but no one answered back. I had no choice. I'll have to go after the tour guide and see if Lonnie's with him. I followed the blood through the snow. I saw there was only one pair of prints leading to the trees, but I didn't know whose they were. Rambo sniffed at the trail. He barked at me once, then stared directly at the trees. That's a good sign, at least. Whoever was over there, Rambo knew them. We followed the prints. The blood splotches didn't stop. The prints were harder to follow once we got into the trees. But Rambo knew exactly where to go. The forest seemed to close in around us as we moved. I stopped every time the wind whistled through the trees. It sounded too much like the flute song, and bad things happened whenever that showed up. Finally, we ended up in a clearing. In the middle of it was Lonnie. He was burying Andre in the snow. "Lonnie, what happened?" I managed to call out. My friend turned to me, his face pale. He came at me, Nick. I had to defend myself," he stammered. I could barely hear him over the wind. His words came out weak and uneven. In his pocket was Andre's knife. I stared at Lonnie. His eyes were glazed over, like he's sleepwalking or about to have a stroke. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what had happened. "Why's the compass in his mouth, Lonnie?" I asked. He'd already managed to bury Andre up to his shoulders. I could see the Russian's face clearly. His eyes were open and bloodshot. His nose was broken, and his lucky compass had been shoved into his mouth. Lonnie shrugged, a quick, jerky motion that didn't sit right with me. He was raving, said it was guiding him or something. "I don't know. Nick, it happened so fast," Rambo growled. His body stiffened as he stared at Lonnie. He sensed something. Rambo, he'd always been a good judge of character. That dog always knew who the bad guys were. I took a step back, my eyes darting between Lonnie and the knife. "How'd he get out of the ropes?" His eye twitched. They flickered around the clearing, like he's looking at something only he could see. "I don't know, Nick. He just snapped, started screaming about the compass. He tried to kill me." Lonnie's voice cracked with emotion, but still something about it felt off, like he was trying too hard. My cop instincts were going off. "I still don't understand about the compass," I pressed him. Lonnie's face hardened. His jaw clenched as he stared me down. "You weren't there, Nick. You didn't see what he was like." Rambo's growling intensified. He bared his teeth now. He moved between me and Lonnie. Okay. Let's just calm down," I said slowly. "We can figure all this out in the morning. Let's just head back to camp, okay?" Lonnie didn't talk as we made our way back, but his movements were jerky, uneven. I kept an eye on him. Rambo stayed on his back. He stayed between me and Lonnie the whole way back. But when we got to camp, it was like a tornado had gone by. The food was thrown all over the place. Our tents were shredded. The snowmobiles were down on their sides. And weirdest of all, the snow around our tents had turned black. I knelt down and grabbed a handful. Ashes. Then behind me, I heard Rambo bark. I turned around just in time to see him pounce at Lonnie. He snapped his jaws, pushing my friend into the snow. I saw the knife glint in Lonnie's hand. "Nick, get him off! Get him off!" he yelled. But again, something was off. The way he said it sounded too flat, too mechanical. I hesitated, and Rambo managed to get his teeth around Lonnie's wrist. With one strong jerk, he ripped his arm away. The dog let out a whine. Blood spattered on the ground, And in one quick motion, Lonnie got to his feet and ran back to the trees. Rambo tried to follow, but I grabbed his collar just in time. I pulled him back as he barked furiously into the darkness. I struggled to calm him down. His fur was all puffed up. He was panting hard. Blood dripped from his muzzle. His eyes remained fixed in the direction Lonnie had run. The cold bit into my skin, but my face was drenched with sweat. It took a while for both of us to calm down. I looked around the wrecked campsite. We needed shelter if we were going to survive the rest of the night. I picked through the wreckage for something we could use. Then the flute music started again, soft and close, and this time there were voices with it. They sang words I didn't understand. The voices overlapped. They formed perfect harmonies that made my ears ring. I turned in a circle, trying to locate the source, but the song seemed to come from every direction. Rambo started growling again, a low, continuous rumble as he stared out into the trees. I walked towards the campfire. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I felt like I wasn't in full control of myself. Then I had the sudden urge to look down, and I saw the ashes. They were moving. They formed tiny mounds over the snow. Then, as I watched, the mounds spread out. They formed lines that connected to one another until I was looking at a large, complicated pattern on the snow. It circled around the burnt-out campfire, and then the lines spread out to each of the tents. Looking at it made my head spin. None of this should be possible. The more I tried to understand it all, the dizzier I got. A strong wave of nausea hit me hard. I fell to my knees. I swiped my hand over the ashes. I wanted to erase them, but they stayed in place. I brushed my fingers over them again and again, but no, the pattern was still there. Then the ground under me began to vibrate. It was subtle at first. I almost thought it was the vertigo, but no, the ashes. They shivered too. Not enough to erase the pattern they made, but it was there. The ground I was on began to snag. I didn't feel like I could move. I began to sink into the snow. My brain screamed at me to move, but all I could manage was to make my foot twitch. I looked around the camp. I remembered the stories about the original Dyatlov incident. I wondered if those hikers heard the music. Did the song infect them too? Then in the distance, I saw them. Figures, and they were moving towards me. Lots of them. Some of them looked like hikers, but others were half naked. There were children with them too. For a second, I thought I saw Andre with them, his forearm barely attached to his elbow. But my vision was too blurry to be sure. And Rambo, I couldn't see him anywhere. I called out for him. I could hear him, but I couldn't see him. I didn't think I could trust my eyes anymore. I didn't know what was real or not. In the background, the song grew louder, and I realized that the singing was coming from the figures walking toward the camp. I could see some of them more clearly now. The figure with the torn-up arm was the nearest to me. In its mouth was something shiny and round, the silver compass. And yet, he still tried to mumble the words to the song, his dead, empty eyes locked with mine. Get up, I told myself. But my limbs refused to move. I continued to sink into the ground. Either the snow would get me or the dead would. I understood that then. The song had always lived here, and there are many ways it can take me. Andre was right in front of me then. He extended a hand toward my face. He grabbed my cheek and pressed down. His nails dug into my flesh until I bled. I wanted to scream in pain, but my mouth refused. And then suddenly, Rambo jumped at Andre, forcing him to the ground. I didn't see what he did. All I heard was a deep growling and a vicious tearing sound. The music grew louder. It almost sounded like a howl. And Rambo answered back with his own. I heard footsteps running behind me, but Rambo was quick. He leapt behind me and I heard Lonnie scream. I still couldn't move, but I felt like I was slowly regaining control of my body. I flexed my hand and tried to push myself up. Behind me, I could hear Rambo and Lonnie struggling in the snow. I heard barks, growls, and screaming. It went on for a long time. Then I felt something wet spatter against my back, and that was what did it. All of a sudden, I could move everything again. I grabbed a rock and turned around. Rambo stood over Lonnie. He was panting hard, and he looked like he had a limp. But as soon as he saw my face, he jumped into my arms. A few hours later, he was snoring away in the sled. I put a splint on his leg and made sure he was nice and comfortable back there. We should be back at the town in a couple more hours. But as I drove, I couldn't help but wonder, did those villagers know what was out there? Did they think I was going to make it back? Or were we chosen to die? I was recovering between jobs when I got an odd request. Someone named Jacob wanted me to teach him more about magic. The name didn't ring a bell at first, but I soon realized he was the hunter we'd saved from the bug-infested hotel. I agreed to the request, but also asked August if he could spare some time. I've been involved with supernatural creatures since I was a child. My first romantic relationship was with a cute creature who had mimic powers when I was about 17. Even with all my experience, I would never fully understand how my magic worked better than someone who relied on it as a life force. August agreed, and we arrived at the empty park first. While we waited, we played rock, paper, scissors because Lucas had recently gotten into playing it with others. August wasn't too great at it, so I let him practice with me for a few minutes. He kept throwing out rock because, in his words, he liked rocks. Jacob showed up, giving us an expression that made it seem as if he'd already regretted his decision. He was looking good, considering how close he'd come to death recently. He still wore the long coat, but had changed his shoes to something more practical. This is August. He knows a lot, so he agreed to help. How long have you been working as a contract worker? I asked after Jacob walked over. He blew a strand of long hair out of his face. If he wanted to do this job, he should at least keep his hair tied back. 2 months. I called because I figured you had connections to getting better weapons. How much would a big gun cost me? He sounded like a teenager. I bet he wasn't even 19 yet. August smiled and gave me a side eye at the mention of a gun. I nudged him, silently ordering him not to make fun of a newbie. A lot, but I wouldn't suggest a gun. If you're going to invest that sort of money in a powerful weapon, a blade, along with charming your coat, would be better. Is your jacket special? Most hunters wore jackets that weren't just for fashion. They could be fused with magic or parts of supernatural creatures to make the fabric resist damage. Some of the more advanced jackets were almost like living creatures bonded with the owner. The suits the agents wore offered the same kind of protection. I've also heard of supernatural mailmen who had uniforms that protected them better than most jackets hunters could get their hands on. It's not a magic one, if that's what you're asking. And why should I use a sword instead of a gun? Isn't keeping your distance better when it comes to monsters? Clearly already annoyed. Ditch the jacket, August chimed in. The younger man scowled. Before he could question the statement, August had closed the distance between them. He slipped behind Jacob, took hold of his long coat, and pulled. I watched the pair as the kid frantically got back to his feet time and time again. No matter how much he tried dodging, August just caught the jacket and swept him off his feet again. By the time I broke the two up, Jacob had removed the coat, only for August to steal it away and tie it around the boy. He had only bruised Jacob's ego, but that was enough for his face to turn red in frustration. I get it. No long coats. Are you happy? Tell me where I can get a damn gun. He tossed the coat to the ground, face sweaty and hands shaking from rage. August wasn't done. He reached over and tied Jacob's hair back with a fair amount of protest. Jacob left his hair tied back, accepting the message, but still angry as hell. To get back to the gun versus sword question, it's mostly based on mass. A bullet is way smaller than a blade. 10 bullets would do less damage than a single stab from even a dagger, I started to explain. Bullshit, Jacob snorted. I knew he was just a little baby, but I didn't realize how much of one. August teased. I swear they were seconds away from a slapping fight. I sighed, shaking my head. I hated just how often people like Jacob became hunters. They thought they could just pick up a few weapons to slaughter evil creatures without understanding how magic even worked. August, I'm going to pretend to stab you, I told him so he would walk near me. To Jacob's confusion, he watched me land a fake stab into August's chest. The dramatic acting out of a fake death wasn't needed to prove my point, though. Magic is power that requires your will to control. A blade moves your entire body. Your entire will flows into it. An attack is more powerful based on the actions and intentions behind it. August stayed on the ground and nodded along with my explanation. Jacob didn't appear overly impressed. You need to put your entire body into firing a gun, like getting in the right position to aim. So why doesn't that count? He pointed out, arms crossed. I started to go into a more detailed lecture about the difference between shooting a bullet and using a blade against a supernatural creature. There were a few factors that made swords the preferred weapon. All the willpower and magic get channeled into the sword in an attack, while when firing a gun, the magic gets fed into the gun itself and not the bullets. Sure, bullets could be blessed, and depending on what type you use, they could kill strong creatures. But those kinds of bullets were out of most hunters' budgets to create. Not even the corporation used them because of how hard they were to produce. Also, most hunters who start out relying on firepower think they're safe at a distance. They don't properly train their bodies to avoid counterattacks. Monsters can fire magic or move faster than some humans can react. As I spoke, Jacob appeared more and more defeated. Even August got bored and started to scroll on his phone while still on the ground. I would have kept going, but Jacob raised a hand to make me stop speaking. "Where can I buy a magic sword then?" he sighed. August stood up and shoved his phone into my face, trying to show off some sort of cat meme. I ignored him. "You can borrow them through the corporation when you accept a contract job. In fact, you can borrow all sorts of supplies you might need for a job. If you return the items clean and with minimal damage, they won't charge you for the use." Jacob gave me a look that told me he wished I'd just told him all that to start with. "Do you want to do a few easy jobs together? You need more experience before taking on more dangerous work. And it would be nice not to deal with this brain eater for once," I offered as I started to push August away. He had gotten bored and draped himself over my left side. Sometimes I wondered why he was so comfortable fooling around and acting so dumb around me. "Brain eater? Like as in he eats monster brains?" Jacob asked as his entire body grew more tense. His mood completely changed. It was as if he were suddenly standing in front of a man-eating beast ready to strike. "Monster or human, not overly picky," August announced. I should have realized that bringing along August was a bad idea. I wasn't thinking properly that day. Jacob drew a handgun he'd kept hidden at his waist and fired in our direction. The bullet was weak, and his movements were slower than August's. He raised a hand that transformed into a set of claws protected with a hard shell. I slightly jumped at the sound but was more confused than startled. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Jacob shouted in disgust. "He's a monster, and you're that close with him." I knew hunters hated supernatural creatures and refused to work with them. But I didn't see Jacob as a real hunter because he'd taken contract work. I just figured he had already worked alongside creatures before. I suppose that was the only difference between a contract worker and a hunter. Contract workers did whatever they needed to be paid. Hunters just wanted to kill supernatural creatures. Partnering up with creatures for jobs is natural in this line of work. "You'll die if you don't," I calmly said. "Are you even still human? Siding with them?" he shouted again. Jacob reached up to pull out the hair elastic which August had used to tie back his hair. Utter hatred and rage showed on his face as his wild hair fell. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but no words came. I didn't think that when it came to dealing with supernatural creatures, there were simple black and white answers, as Jacob believed. Almost every contract worker dies because of their job, regardless of whether they accept help from creatures or not. It's your choice to stand by what you think is right and live the life you're comfortable with, August said in an even tone. Jacob made a noise and scooped up his jacket. I called after him, but he stormed off, and refusing to even look back. Yes, August was right. Contract workers had a high mortality rate, but Jacob wouldn't last 2 weeks the way he was now. You could have handled that a bit better, I scolded. He shot at us. I think I gave him as much respect as he deserved. August shrugged. Something was up with him today. His playful interactions felt almost forced. He didn't carry the same kind of energy as normal. Oh, please, as if that bullet was actually a threat. I added with a huff. Why are you so upset over this? You didn't even know his name until today. You're not his family or even his friend. Who cares if he's not listening to the advice that will keep him alive? August questioned. He had a point. Jacob and I had different worldviews, and I doubted we would ever get along. I still didn't want him to die if it could be avoided. I knew people risking their lives was required because of the supernatural threats always ready to strike innocent people. But that didn't mean contract workers or agents needed to throw their lives away. I didn't agree with how hunters did things, and yet I wouldn't want them slaughtered just because they couldn't get past the idea of working with a supernatural creature. He's human. That means he's weak. We don't have power compared to creatures like you. I just wish he accepted the help. Who says humans don't have the power to deal with us? I noticed August reach up to rub the side of his neck through his buttoned-up shirt collar. I've heard the only ones with the skill to bind creatures with a black collar were humans or half-breeds. He had been leashed twice, once by using magic and the second time with love. Is something bothering you? I asked, directing our conversation in a different direction. August seemed to consider if he wanted to tell me. He lowered his hands and shook his head. No, not really. If it becomes a thing, I'll tell you about it. It's not worth worrying about until I have more information. What did that mean? I didn't get the chance to ask him because both of our cell phones went off. We checked the message at the same time. August's face brightened seeing what had just been sent through. Want to do a job together? An urgent call came asking for help with an ongoing attack. We accepted the request and were on the move in seconds. A door appeared to take us to a different park elsewhere in the world, and right into the middle of a fight. I didn't even have a weapon because I hadn't expected to work that day. We took half a second to look over the utter chaos we had just stepped into. 2 agents in suits were rushing around getting civilians to safety. A third was making doorways to get people away, but also to bring in backup like us. The threat was a massive plant with thick vines lashing out, trying to grab any living thing within reach. I need a weapon, I shouted at the agent making the doors. He pulled out a dagger and 3 paper charms, just as a vine came between us. I was able to grab the dagger and a charm, but I lost 2 of the papers in the process of avoiding the attack that could have taken my arm off. I didn't have time to waste trying to get the charms I dropped. I ran forward, dodging attacks and cutting the vines as often as I could. August went to work on a counterattack right away. With his sharp claws, he could cut back the vines almost as fast as they recovered. We were separated. He focused on helping the agent, and I used myself as a distraction. The park must have been full when this monster plant started to attack. I figured at least 10 more people needed to be escorted away. Another vine came down just as I noticed a girl hiding behind a trash can. I rolled to dodge the crushing attack, then kept going toward her. My heart felt cold from fear. I watched in horror as she was grabbed by the ankle and dragged across the grass into a large, mouth-like pod. I heard screams behind me as more people were grabbed. August saved me from a vine coming down, almost slicing me in half. I didn't stop running toward the pod with the new victim. Help the agents, I shouted to him. He didn't even take the time to nod. He ran off again, knowing his efforts were better used to protect the larger group of people. I reached the pod and slammed the dagger into the soft flesh of the plant. I hacked away, creating a large enough opening to see the girl slowly being dragged further inside. A thick slime from inside the pod hit my hand, causing pain. It splashed over my face as I cut. Acid immediately started taking off layers of my skin. I closed my left eye tightly to keep it from being burned away. It hurt like hell, but I refused to stop. Within seconds, I had torn away enough of the pod to reach in and grab hold of the girl under her arms. The acid was much slower at going through fabric. By some miracle, I got her out, the plant recoiling in pain from the damage. She had fainted from the experience, so I dragged her limp body a few feet away. Her back had taken most of the damage from the acidic slime. She wore a hijab that was slowly dissolving. If she hadn't worn so many layers, she would have gotten far worse burns. I pulled off my jacket and cut off the sleeves that the acid had touched. The rest of the coat was clean. August appeared again and picked up the girl. I wrapped my jacket around her hair and asked him to keep her covered before I turned back to keep fighting. In the past 2 minutes, it looked like most of the people in the park had been saved. Now we could focus on defeating the plant monster. The massive vines parted to reveal a tall, humanoid shape growing from the ground. Its eyes were closed, and it seemed like its actions were driven by instinct. An odd feeling came from my feet. It was as if the ground suddenly felt hollow, like I would fall through if I put too much weight on it. I focused on the ground, using my sight to see the flow of magic. This plant was draining everything around it. If we didn't stop it soon, it would absorb everything in the ground, making it impossible for anything to grow here again. A sharp pain came from my only open eye as something inside me snapped. My hand flew over my face as waves of pain rippled from it. I took a second or two to recover and carefully blinked away the pain. What I saw and heard terrified me to my core. I'd never been so frightened in my life. I saw nothing unusual. No plant monster, no flow of magic, no agents or August. I heard nothing. The air felt so empty. I shook my head, refusing to believe this was happening. I'd stressed out my eyesight before, causing it to be blurry, but nothing like this had ever happened. Some humans have no sense of the supernatural. They can't see or interact with magic or creatures, and creatures also don't see them. For a moment, I assumed I'd stressed my eyes so much I lost my sight altogether. It felt like a core part of myself had been ripped away. Slowly, it all started to come back. Hazy at first, then the sounds of the battle returned in full force. I should have been thankful, but since I could see the plant monster again, I knew it could also see me. A vine caught my ankle. It lifted me off the ground and slammed me down so hard I bled out for a few seconds. I heard ribs crack and break. When I opened my eyes again, I was dangling 5 feet above the monster's wide-open mouth, ready to devour me. I dropped my dagger. I was beaten and weak. August and the agents weren't within range to save me. I needed to think. What the hell could I do? I had an idea, but I didn't know if it would work. I took my cell phone out from my jeans pocket, glad I didn't keep it in my jacket. I also kept the paper charm in my pants pocket. I stuck the charm to my phone and threw it toward the open mouth just as the creature let go of my ankle. Charms are nothing but a bunch of magic sealed inside a spell on paper. More complex ones do different things, but that one was set to explode 3 seconds after sticking. I'd made a makeshift grenade. Somehow, it saved me. The magic blew apart the plant's mouth and throat. August caught me midair and we landed hard on the ground. Now that the plant was weakened, the agents in the backup that had just arrived could take care of the rest. August carefully put me on the ground. I was barely awake. Everything hurt. While the vine had been around my ankle, it had drained my energy. I couldn't even lift my arm. The girl, I asked in a weak voice. She's fine, August told me. For some reason, he used a claw to cut into his palm. I watched in confusion as he started to rub his bloody hand over the acid burns on my arms. I winced in pain, but didn't have the strength to pull away. My blood neutralizes acid and poisons, he explained. Gross, I mumbled. We'll get you to the clinic in a second. At those words, I weakly grabbed at his now dirty button-down shirt. No, costs too much. No clinic. Just let me sleep. I slumped back to the ground and passed out again. I just exploded my phone. I couldn't take a trip to the clinic for some broken ribs and burns if I wanted to afford a new one. I half expected to wake up at the clinic anyway, but I found myself in my own bed. Next to me were piles of fresh rolls of bandages. I was able to sit up enough to look myself over. I was almost a mummy from being wrapped up so tightly in so many of them. I knew these were magic. They sped up healing and would disappear once the magic was used up. I hated to think how expensive all this would be. I heard a noise coming from my apartment. Soon, a person came inside the room. I'd never met them before, but I knew a little about her species. "Oh, good. You're awake. I'm Raru. I took care of you," she said as she pulled a chair over and sat next to my bed. Her body looked like it was made of pastel purple jello. Their species didn't really have a name, but most people called them slimes. Even though their bodies looked gelatinous, they were actually firm. From what I'd heard, they were on the weaker side magic-wise, but could quickly learn skills. For a while, they had been used for less than desirable things. Now, they were starting to be treated much better and worked hard to get respectable jobs. "Thank you. Did August hire you?" I asked, wondering how much I'd need to pay him back. "Yes. I'm training to be a nurse and just need to complete my volunteer hours. All the treatment I did won't cost you anything because you're doing me a favor by letting me work on you. But I only worked on everything above the waist. I understand how people feel about my kind, and you weren't awake to consent to anything else that might have made you uncomfortable." Raru fidgeted in her seat. Her hair was made of the same material as the rest of her body, but she styled it into a short bob. She wore plain blue scrubs that matched her profession. I felt bad that she was trying so hard, but some people would never see past her species. The slime creatures were a recently created race. At first, they weren't sentient. They were dolls that could do simple tasks, so you can imagine what they were used for. "You're a nurse, and I trust you. But thank you for considering that," I said. Her face turned into a smile. I knew she was going to make a great nurse or doctor. I thanked her again, and she got ready to leave. We went over how long I needed to rest, when to put on new bandages, and things like that. She also told me August had dropped off a new phone for me. He had already put in his contact information and even made my lock screen a very cute photo of Lucas, which I changed. I did love that kid, but I wasn't related to him. People might think it was weird to have a photo of an unrelated child on my phone screen like that. Since I was now bedridden for a while, I started setting up my phone again and tracked down the rest of my contacts. It was really just to distract myself from thinking about the moment when my eyesight failed me. I was also trying not to think about Jacob. I would have died if August hadn't done as much as he did. I simply couldn't do this job if I didn't have help from supernatural creatures. I just hoped Jacob had learned that lesson before it was too late. I'd recently made a large payment on my medical debt. For the first time, it seemed like I could pay it off within the next few years. But now my bank account was hurting. When August asked us to work together, I didn't ask too many questions. I needed all the jobs I could get. When I arrived at the start of the forest trail, I understood why August was so eager to take this request. It was a run-of-the-mill investigation looking into some disappearances from the campsites. According to the email, 3 couples had gone missing without a trace. It was a bit odd that whatever had been targeting the campers was only taking them in pairs, but this forest was a bit odd too. Still, it was strange in a good way. The air was so fresh it felt like it removed any tension or stress from your body. The magic that ran through the trees was so pure I didn't doubt creatures flocked here. The place just felt right. I wouldn't have minded spending more time there. I adjusted the straps of my pack, wondering why August was so late. Suddenly, I was ambushed. Someone wrapped their arms around me from behind and started rubbing their cheek against mine. I let out a startled noise and shoved the person away. "What are you doing?" I demanded. August didn't answer. He just attacked again. After a few seconds of the assault, he released me. "I'm getting my scent all over you. It's better than any bug spray," he explained. He was acting different. His face was bright, and he couldn't stand still. He looked like a kid on Christmas. I took a step away from him, but he didn't notice. "I figured we should do this job together since couples are going missing," he explained as he started to walk down the path through the woods. "We are not acting like a couple," I announced. "I only brought one tent," he said with a raised eyebrow. I made a noise. He didn't appear to notice. As we walked, his eyes kept darting around, his hands turned into sharp claws, and I saw traces of his insect face start showing. There wasn't a threat. He just wasn't able to hold himself back. Out of nowhere, he shouted, his face fully transforming. "I can't help myself. I'll see you later." I watched in stunned silence as he bolted off into the trees. The last I saw of him was his claws digging into the soft dirt so he could rub his face against the ground. It appeared like the air was a bit too good for him. I didn't get upset that he abandoned me. I figured this trip would be good for him. From what I'd heard, he was born and raised in a forest by some mountains. After his home had been destroyed, he'd been stuck inside a city and going between jobs. I left him to do whatever he needed as I kept hiking, knowing he would catch up. The forest was almost too perfect. I didn't sense any kind of danger. Even the animals weren't afraid of a stranger in their home. Since the last set of disappearances, the forest had been emptied of campers. I stopped by a few abandoned campsites, looking for any signs of foul play. There was nothing to make me think the couples were harmed. I wore myself out from all the travel. I settled on a campsite and got started on setting up the tent. Dinner was a can of soup. When it grew too dark to see, I decided to call it a day. August hadn't even sent a text yet. I was starting to worry about him, but I hadn't gotten any kind of bad vibes from the place. Maybe he just lost track of time. I left the tent open, and Casey showed up. Not a single insect bothered me the entire time I was inside the forest. A cool breeze blew through the open flap of the tent, which made me glad I could keep it open without worrying about getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. I was half inside my sleeping bag, on my side, almost asleep, when I heard footsteps. I tensed up and grabbed the handle of the weapon I had borrowed for this job. It was an 8-inch blade that looked a bit like a regular kitchen knife. Listening while I kept my eyes closed, I waited for the person to get closer. "Are you asleep?" I let myself relax a little when I heard August speak, but something might be copying his voice. I opened my eyes a crack to peek out of the tent and saw his figure in the dark. I could easily tell it was him. Masking what your magic feels like is a very hard thing to do. I closed my eyes again as I listened to him climb into the tent. I expected him to get settled into the sleeping bag I'd set up beside me, but he didn't. I felt eyes on me, so I rolled onto my back to see what was going on. He had carefully positioned himself over my body. He smelled like river water, and his hair dripped small droplets onto my face. August must have washed himself off somewhere nearby after digging around in the dirt. But why was he hovering above me like that? And why the hell was he looking at me the way he was? At first, I assumed he was just joking around. Goosebumps appeared on my arms, and I wanted to push him away. "What the hell are you doing?" I hissed. "Couples have been disappearing. We should play the part," he replied in a low voice. When he started to close the distance between us, I let out a shrill noise and tossed him to the side. I shot up, ready to grab my knife in case he lost it. August started to roll around, cackling as he did so. I scowled when I realized why he was acting so weird. He was drunk. The magic in this area was too pure for him. I'd heard of creatures getting high while being in places like this, but I'd never seen it before. "Go to sleep," I ordered, my face red. I rolled back onto my side and slipped the knife back under the thin pillow. August laughed for a little while longer. At least one of us enjoyed his little prank. "Do you like guys?" he asked. I felt my face grow a deep shade of red. I turned around to look at him, confused over the question. Who told you? I started, then realized I just outed myself. I rolled back in a huff. I prefer girls, but there've been a few cute guys around lately. And no, I'm not talking about you. After you've seen someone eat a person's brain out of their skull, it's hard to ever have romantic feelings for them. He finally settled down, and I was hoping he was just going to drop all this. What guys? He pressed. No one you know. What about you? Any single parents you met while dropping off Lucas? I had hoped I could deflect the question to avoid answering it. I heard him stretch and shake his head against the sleeping bag. There are a few single and not so single parents who appeared interested in me. They're not to my taste. I don't have any interest in that sort of thing right now. There isn't any time between taking care of Lucas and staying on top of work. Besides, do you think a normal human could ever handle knowing what I am? He was right about that. I had known about creatures since I was able to walk. I couldn't imagine how hard it would be for a future romantic partner of his to deal with knowing he killed and ate humans. I still didn't know how I felt about it, or what my feelings toward August really were. Were we friends? We acted like it. At the same time, I found that hard to accept, considering what he was. For some reason, I was fine with Ido, Harp, April, and even Klaus. But it felt almost wrong to accept that August and I were close. It's all a bit tragic, he spoke in the darkness, his voice carrying an unusual weight. Things would be far easier if we were all truly the monsters humans say we are. The ability to feel love may be the cruelest trick played on all of us. I stayed silent, letting his words turn in my head. When I looked over my shoulder, I saw August had fallen asleep. He was right. It was cruel. The world would be so much easier to deal with if every creature had no remorse and slaughtered humans for fun. Sure, there were some out there with hearts darker than the bottom of the ocean. But there were also supernatural creatures who loved and cared for humans. They would risk their own lives to save them, like August. Some also preyed on humans as a food source while still being able to deeply care for them. Hunters saw all supernatural creatures as something to be erased from the world. They considered magic unnatural, and while they tried to save people from bad monsters, they killed the good ones too. Some days it felt like there were no right answers. Nothing was black and white when it came to supernatural creatures and humans interacting. If I called August a friend, I bet there would be a few people who would condemn me for it. He'd killed people, and they wouldn't care if they were bad or not. I didn't consider their views invalid. It was just all so damn complicated. A few years ago, I decided not to care what others said about my relationships with creatures. My feelings were the only thing that mattered in my life. And I found myself unsure of my feelings toward August. All these thoughts went through my mind as I let myself drift off to sleep. I wasn't certain what time it was when I woke up. The world was nothing but gray. I sat up to look outside the tent. A dense fog blocked my sight beyond a step or two from where I sat. I felt a bit tense, but at the same time, I couldn't sense any kind of threat. Reaching over, I shook August, trying to wake him up. His eyes remained closed and his breathing was even. I shook him harder. Nothing. I didn't want to talk, just in case something was listening. Grabbing my knife, I poked the tip of a finger to make it bleed. Very carefully, I rubbed a few drops of blood against his lips. Then I went so far as to rub it against his gums. Still nothing. He was out for an unnatural reason. I was alone to deal with whatever was going on. Slowly, I left the tent, gripping the handle of the knife tightly. The magic of this place was too dense. Everything was too bright to see. When I looked carefully, trying to spot any kind of danger in the midst, my eyesight was useless. Right now, it looked like my only real choice was to call for some help. Of course, my cell phone wasn't working. Magic didn't agree with technology. My phone was beefier than most and should have been able to handle some magic, but not this much. This worried me. I wasn't the strongest, and August wouldn't wake up. The magic of this forest was too pure to even consider using. It would fry me if I took even a small amount to fight with. My knife felt too small for comfort. Shapes started to appear out of the fog. Twisted hands reached out. I quickly slashed at them, the silver-tipped steel easily cutting through wood. As the threats got closer, I saw they were made up of branches and moss. Some appeared human, and others were a mixture of human and animal features. They were easy enough to take down, but I wasn't certain how many of them there were. If they had been made from the magic of this forest, that would mean their numbers could be endless. A long vine lashed out. I jumped over it and focused on taking out another one of the attackers made of twigs. That was a mistake. The vine reached into the tent, grabbing hold of August by the ankle. I noticed just in time to cut the vine in two. The effort was for nothing. The vine suddenly started to overwhelm us. I couldn't fight off so many with just my knife. I lost the battle within seconds. The rough vines tore up my exposed skin. They ripped through the sleeves of my shirt and caused deep cuts in their wake. I gritted my teeth, trying to push through them. One as thick as my arm wrapped around my waist. Another bent my wrist back so I would let go of the weapon. My body was slammed back and forth between heavy tree trunks until it was certain I was too stunned by pain to fight back. Then it dropped me. I landed on my stomach on the hard ground. My entire body ached. I felt something grab hold of my wrists, then pull them painfully together against my back. No matter how much I struggled, I couldn't get my hands free or even lift my body off the ground. I looked up, expecting to see those monsters start attacking, but instead, I saw something much more terrifying. All the sounds stopped. The air grew so heavy it nearly suffocated me. My body started to tremble on its own. Another figure started walking closer at a slow pace. Each step made my heart beat faster. I didn't need my sight to see the massive amount of magic it carried. Forests with a large flow of magic almost gain a personality. Each forest felt different, but they normally never gained a will of their own. Complex thoughts and emotions are normally impossible for an abstract idea like the representation of the forest itself. When creatures like that come into this world, it causes a big stir. I think there may have only been 4 or 5 people at the corporation who were on the same level as a will of the forest. They could almost be considered as gods, and one was walking toward me. Since they don't have physical bodies, they often gather what they can find to make one. This forest was covered with a shawl made of leaves. A tower of antlers made up what should have been its head and face. It stood and carefully moved on feet, stolen from a young deer. 8 human arms on each side came from the shawl and lined its tall body. Why do these kinds of monsters always take human arms? When it stopped a few feet away from me, it raised an arm. I thought I was dead in that second. The vines lifted August off the ground, his head still limp. His arms were pulled to his side. I could do nothing but watch as the vines started to pull and twist his left arm. A voice I didn't recognize screamed at them to stop as his bones were broken. His face twisted in pain, but his eyes didn't open. More screams came, begging for them to leave him alone. To my shock, I had been the one yelling without being aware of it. The vine stopped moving after his arm had been mangled. My eyes stung with angry tears. I hated how powerless I was at that moment. Choose your life, the forest spoke in an airy voice that chilled me to my very core. I stared in disbelief. Was it lying, or would it really let one of us go? So far, only couples had disappeared. I knew if I refused to pick one of us, we would both die. A godlike power stood in front of me, waiting for an answer. I closed my eyes and pressed my forehead hard into the dirt, never wanting to ever have to make this choice. August wasn't human, so he should be the one sacrificed, right? He had at one point been so dangerous they placed a black collar on him. He'd killed and eaten humans. He would have killed me when we first met if he'd gotten the chance. He was a monster who loved his son. I hit my forehead against the ground, trying not to think about that. I would die if I let myself think anything positive about him. But those thoughts didn't stop. He was the best person to raise Lucas, regardless of not being human. No matter what sins he had committed in the past, an innocent boy shouldn't go without his adopted father. All the stupid jokes and smiles came rushing through my mind, no matter how hard I tried to block them out. How did I feel about him? What were we to each other? At this rate, I should be the one to give up my life. I had nothing but a mountain of medical debt, no family, only a few friends who could easily move on when I was gone. I was nothing. Not a soul would miss me. I gritted my teeth, thinking back to 2 years ago. My partner had given her life for me. I'm still trying to get back on my feet. She would be insulted if I gave up now. I opened my eyes again to look around at my surroundings. Vines were ready and waiting to attack if I moved. More of those branch monsters also waited. My knife was directly in front of my face, but my hands were still bound. August wouldn't wake up, and we were facing a forest with more power than anything I'd ever dealt with, combined. Time's up, pick, yours or his, the forest spoke again. I had no chance of beating this thing. If we were both going to die, I wasn't going to let it kill me without at least doing something. Neither, I hissed. I sat up enough to bite down on the handle of the knife. It took in magic and forced it through my jaw to make it clamp down and stay shut. Saying that hurt was an understatement. I then took a huge risk, dispelling the magic around us. It's a basic trick of enforcing your will outward to push the power around your body away. If you don't have enough power behind the request, the magic in the air explodes. My luck held out. The power forced back the vines and creatures, but not the forest. The effort burned every cell in my body. There was a reason why people didn't use that trick very often. I needed to act fast before the creatures recovered. Using raw magic had massive drawbacks. I gathered some from the ground and focused it on the bottom of my left foot. Using that power, I kicked off the ground. It was basically an explosion. Yes, I jumped 8 feet off the ground, but it caused all the bones in my left foot to shatter, and I was going to do the same thing to my right foot. I spun, so I was now facing the ground. As my right foot hit a branch, I used double the power to kick off the branch and downward toward the forest. Staring up at my actions. If I lived through this, it would take a lot of magic just so I could use my foot again. I came down hard, driving everything I had into sinking the blade into the mess of antlers that made up the face of the forest. I landed painfully on the ground, the knife still buried in the creature's face. Rolling on my back, I took stock of how I was doing. Both feet had been shattered. My jaw ached. My hands were still bound. Every ounce of my body ached. Oh, and the forest was removing the knife from its face as if it was nothing. Great. I was going to die, and I didn't even make a scratch. Do you love him? The airy voices whispered. I was about to pass out. My body was at the end of its limits. I slowly shook my head, wondering if our deaths would be swift. I don't know how I feel about him, I said, voice rough. The antlers held no expression, but to me, they appeared confused. He's done some good things. He's done some bad things. I'm worried I'll become a bad person if we become friends. It's like, I don't care about the bad stuff, you know? It's just hard to explain, and I don't understand it myself. I feel like his good side is too good for me. Being human and interacting with creatures is so damn frustrating. I doubted this creature had ever received such a weird answer to a simple question. Regardless, I didn't pick either option, so that meant it was the end for us. I let my eyes close, wanting an easy and quiet death. I woke up with droplets of rain hitting my face. I hurt just as much as before. The world appeared gray, but the fog had lifted. August was sitting next to me, knees up to his chest, a confused smile on his face. Something happened? He asked. He looked fine. His arm had healed without any issues, most likely because of the pure air of the forest. I wished I was that lucky. When he started to help me move, I found out I was at least a little lucky. The foot on my bad leg had healed to a sprain, but my other was still shattered. I didn't know if the healing was from the pure air of the woods or if the forest had left a parting gift. August helped me hobble into the corporation office to explain what happened. Thank God for magic doors. They were able to treat my wounds there. The foot brace I needed to keep on cost me the entire amount I made from that job. Still, it beat a broken foot. The small clinic area outside the office was mostly empty. A nurse started looking over the wounds on my arms when Klaus came inside. He took over so I could give my full report. As he worked, it felt a little bit weird to have him fussing over me. I honestly didn't know his position or job title. He seemed to be the person who collected all the information about the jobs and not much more. Based on his old scars, I assumed he was semi-retired. "What happens now?" I asked him after my arms were wrapped up. "Take some rest, mister," he said with a sharp inhale of breath. I think he was annoyed that I nearly died again. "You know what I mean," I pressed. He leaned back in the chair, arms crossed, and let out a large sigh. "You already know. We'll do whatever we can to ensure couples don't camp inside that park. If the forest switches who it targets, we'll deal with it then," he admitted. I wanted to be angry, but I felt too damn tired. That was it. The families of the people who went missing wouldn't get closure because the creature who killed their loved ones was too powerful to deal with. This sort of thing happens far too often. I shouldn't have been upset about it, but I was. "Why did it let us go?" I asked, honestly confused why I was still alive. "Well, that's an easy answer. You're amusing," Klaus said, flashing a smile. I frowned, not liking his answer. "No, really, if we know, then maybe someone else could be saved," I pointed out. He shrugged, shaking his head. "Who knows why some creatures do what they do? Could be a complex reason humans may never understand, or just because they felt like it. That's what makes this job so damn hard. Either way, you're alive. August gets to go home to see his son, and we're all thankful for the positive outcome. I don't get to see enough people coming back safe. There's a reason why these beds are empty." I felt my stomach drop at his words. I was the only one getting medical treatment at that moment. I almost felt guilty for complaining as much as I did. Klaus stood up and made me promise to get some rest and to also watch out for August. He'd heard I broke a few bones and was convinced that eating hard-boiled eggs with the shell was a way to get them to heal faster. I prayed Lucas never got sick or hurt because of how well-meaning and misinformed his adopted father could be. I could walk around with the magic foot brace, but for once, I listened and stayed in bed to rest. I hated being in one spot, though. The idea of that forest being free to take any victims it pleased bothered me. I hated how powerless I was. But that's how things were with magic. More experience meant more strength. Humans simply didn't live long enough to compete against monsters. I should just be glad I was still alive after everything. While on bed rest, I called Ito to see how his jobs were going. He was fairly busy, so we couldn't see each other, but at least talking to him helped me get my mind off a few things. Until the next job. I went to a friend's house in the Bridgeport area of Harrison County, West Virginia. At the sight of my new rifle, he began to tell me a story of a strange animal that had been killed on the farm by the man who owned it before his death. The farmer was an avid hunter and went out almost every night. One night, the farmer's dogs caught a scent and took off. They ran for about an hour and stopped at the base of a tree. As usual, the farmer made his way up the hill to the tree to shoot the animal the dogs had cornered. There was nothing there, though. Thinking this was very strange, he started to look around when he noticed a tree with its limbs shaking. Something was jumping from tree to tree to avoid being seen. The farmer, finding this very strange, went and told my friend what had happened and dismissed it altogether. About a week later, the supposed creature did the same trick. This made the old man suspicious because his dogs were very well trained and had never let him down before. This continued for about a month. One night, the dogs treated an animal, and the farmer got there quickly and shot it. To his surprise, it was no ordinary animal. It had long grayish-brown hair and was about 5 feet tall. Its hands were human-like. and its feet resembled hands more than anything else. I told my friend he was crazy, so he decided to prove it to me. He told me the old man had kept the animal, but did not have it mounted because he was afraid he had done something wrong. My friend took me to the old barn, and there it was. The old man had nailed its carcass to the wall. I was shocked. It was built a lot like a human and had hair 6 or 7 inches long. It had very large, sharp teeth and resembled some kind of ape-like creature. I told my friend I wouldn't say anything about it, but I feel that it is my duty to report this. If anyone has any idea what this animal could be, please let me know. My girlfriend and I are renting a cabin in West Virginia. A nasty ice storm came through and knocked out the power. It has been out ever since. The whole county is dark and will be for a while. The animals are acting bold. Last night, my girlfriend and I walked to the end of the long driveway to get something out of the car. The dog started staring at the edge of the field and went toward it. He is young and sometimes gets distracted. He doesn't run away, but you'll look up and see him behind the house or somewhere nearby. Anyway, my girlfriend ran to him and started bringing him back when I spotted something at the edge of the field. It's what the dog was looking at. I saw it run across the road and into the field. It was very low to the ground and pale in color. It was too fast and too dark to make out what it was. I assumed it was a coyote, so I called out, "Hey, there's something over there, get back here." She walked back over to me by the car. From there, we held the light and shined it in that direction. I saw its eyes looking at us. Then I saw more sets of eyes, probably about 7 in total. They were shifting up and down the hill in the field, hiding and peeking out to see us. At this point, we still thought it was coyotes, so I kept the light on them while she got what she needed from the car. The thing is, I kept my light and my eyes on them the whole time, and they seemed to stand up. Suddenly, their eye shine would rise, as if they stood on their back legs. Their eyes went from about 1 to 2 feet off the ground to easily 5 or 6 feet. I didn't mention this to her and just said, "Coyotes, let's go inside." Throughout the night, we had to go outside to put gas in the generator as the power was still off. She held the flashlight while I filled the generator. She was shining the light around, keeping an eye out for anything, and keeping the dog with us. She spotted 2 sets of eyes about 100 yards away at the bottom of the big hill that the house sits on. She said, "Something's down there." I said, "Coyotes or deer?" She replied, "Whatever it is, just doubled in size." And sure enough, I looked and these things were rising up and back down, like the ones earlier. We have coyotes here. Everything about these events screams coyote to me, but I cannot fathom how they stood up like that. I saw it run across the road, and though I didn't get a good look at it, it was not a deer. It was fast and low to the ground. It didn't bound and jump like deer do. I've been thinking about it all day. It had to be a coyote. But then, how did it get so tall? My name is Adi, a name that means spirit in the Navajo language. I am a warrior of my tribe. My skin bronzed by the desert sun, my body chiseled by the harsh conditions of our land. I carry the traditions and stories of my people in my heart, with the wisdom of our ancestors echoing in my mind. I was raised under the watchful eyes of my grandfather, a respected elder whose stories were as numerous as the stars in the sky. One story he shared with me has haunted my dreams since childhood. It started with the arrival of archaeologists, strangers from a distant land, eager to uncover the secrets buried deep within our sacred grounds. They were ignorant of the balance of our world, how the living coexist with the spirits of our ancestors. My grandfather was a young man then, curious and wary of these newcomers. The archaeologists began their work, their tools disturbing the silence of our ancestral resting place. They ignored the warnings, the pleas to respect our sacred lands. It wasn't long before the tranquility of our lives was shattered. The spirit they awoke was a skinwalker. My grandfather's voice would tremble as he spoke of it. The skinwalker, a malevolent entity capable of taking any form it desired. The archaeologists had disturbed its rest, and in its wrath, it sought vengeance. Unprepared for the terror they had unleashed, the archaeologists turned to my tribe for help. My grandfather, despite his anger at their ignorance and the desecration of our land, agreed to assist them. He was, after all, an advocate for peace and understanding. The Skinwalker attacked relentlessly, its shape-shifting form sowing chaos and fear. Half of our tribe, along with the archaeologists, fell to its fury. My grandfather, a young warrior then, could only watch in despair. But in that despair, a glimmer of hope arose. An elder, known for his spiritual connection, stepped forward. He was a quiet man, a healer, and deeply respected. He proposed a sacrifice, his life for the peace of our tribe. My grandfather told me how the elder approached the wrathful Skinwalker, his voice steady and calm. He offered his life, his spirit, to quiet the disturbed one. The Skinwalker, perhaps sensing the truth and sincerity in the elder's spirit, accepted. In a flash of blinding light, the elder and the Skinwalker vanished, leaving behind a stunned silence. Our tribe had lost many, but the Skinwalker's reign of terror was over. I carry this story in my heart, a reminder of the balance we must maintain with our ancestors and our lands. It's a testament to the courage and sacrifice of our people and a warning to those who dare to disrupt the sacred grounds of the Navajo. My name is Adi, and I am a warrior, a guardian of our stories, our traditions, and our lands. As a park ranger for many years, I had always heard rumors about the mysterious creature known as Bigfoot. Most dismissed it as a myth, but there were enough sightings over the years to make me curious. One night, while on patrol, I saw something moving in the distance. I approached cautiously, my flashlight shining on a huge, hairy creature standing over 8 feet tall. It was Bigfoot. I couldn't believe it. The creature that had been the subject of countless legends was standing right in front of me, and it was angry. It charged at me. I instinctively pulled out my knife, ready to defend myself. The creature was strong, but I was fast and managed to dodge its attacks. I swung my knife with all my strength and landed a hit on its chest. It roared in pain, but didn't back down. We battled for what seemed like an eternity until finally I landed a fatal blow. Bigfoot stumbled back, and I watched as it collapsed to the ground, motionless. I was both scared and amazed at what I had accomplished, but my victory was short-lived. As I made my way back to the station, I noticed something wasn't right. I was injured, and the wounds were getting worse by the minute. I knew Bigfoot had hurt me more than I realized. I stumbled through the woods, trying to make it back to the station, but it was too late. I collapsed on the ground, my strength fading away. I could hear my colleagues' voices in the distance, but it was too late. The injuries were too severe. I knew I was going to die. As I lay there, I thought about my life and everything I had accomplished. I had always loved my job and felt honored to protect the park and all its inhabitants, but I never imagined that my encounter with Bigfoot would be my downfall. In the end, I died alone in the woods, a victim of a creature most people didn't even believe existed. But I knew the truth, and I hoped that my story would serve as a warning to others who dare to venture into the unknown. The park could be a beautiful and peaceful place, but it was also full of danger. And sometimes that danger could be too much to handle. I had always loved working as a park ranger. The fresh air, the beautiful landscapes, and the opportunity to help people made it the perfect job for me. But when I discovered that my colleagues and supervisor were hiding the truth about dangerous predators in the park, everything changed. I couldn't believe it at first. The idea that something was stalking people in the woods seemed like a fairy tale, but the evidence was clear. I couldn't ignore it. When I confronted my colleagues, they denied everything and told me to mind my own business. But I knew I couldn't stay silent. I decided to take matters into my own hands and went into the woods alone to find out what was really going on. I had my rifle with me, just in case. As I walked deeper into the forest, I began to hear strange noises, branches cracking, leaves rustling, and something moving in the bushes. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Suddenly, I saw it. A huge, hulking creature with razor-sharp claws and glowing red eyes. It was one of the predators that had been attacking people in the park. I knew I had to act fast if I wanted to survive. I raised my rifle and fired, hitting the creature in the chest. It roared in pain and charged at me, claws slashing through the air. I fired again and again until the creature finally fell to the ground. I felt a surge of relief and triumph, but also a sense of horror. This creature had once been human before it was transformed into a monster by my former colleagues' experiments. They had been playing God, and now innocent people were paying the price. I knew I had to tell the world what had happened to make sure nothing like this could ever happen again. I walked out of the woods feeling both proud and haunted by what I'd done. Unfortunately, no one believed me when I said that I had proof and that I'd led them to the corpse. They just laughed and called me crazy. Am I really crazy? I know this is going to sound weird and ridiculous, but the craziest thing happened at Walmart today that kind of freaked me out for a while. My girlfriend and I go to Walmart pretty frequently. It's cheap, and sometimes they have really cool Disney and anime shirts and stuff that we like. It's only 5 minutes from our house. She told me she was going to check the women's clothes to see if they had any biker shorts, and I was going to go to the men's section to see if they had any new anime or Disney shirts. We decided I would just meet back with her since the registers are right in front of the women's clothes, and then we would go. When I was done checking the men's section, I saw my girlfriend walking toward the food section. In my head, I was wondering why she was going there, so I started following her to catch up. I saw her suddenly turn left, so I ran and turned left. No one was there. It was an empty aisle. I was confused, so I kept looking, thinking she was messing with me, and maybe went to the next aisle. But there wasn't anybody near there either. I decided to call her and said, "Hey, where are you? And why did you go to the food aisle? I told you I'd meet back up with you in the women's clothes." She said, "I'm in the women's clothes. I've been in the same spot." I immediately said, "I just saw you walk here," referring to where I was. She was confused. I ran toward the women's section and found her, then told her what happened and what I saw. She said maybe I mistook someone else for her, but my girlfriend is pretty distinct. She's 5'9", has really long blonde hair, and is decked out completely in Disney. She was definitely weirded out, but kind of just shrugged it off. Honestly, I have no clue what happened. I was only about 7 feet from her when she turned into the aisle, and I don't think she could have made it all the way down to the next one by the time I turned. I ran around the entire vicinity looking for her because I thought it was weird. She was legit trying on clothes when I met back up with her at the women's section. Who the heck did I see? Or what was it? The fact this happened at Walmart of all places is weird in itself, but it really did freak me out. I know people are going to think, "Oh, you just saw someone who looked like your girlfriend," but she was wearing something very specific, a Disneyland jersey, which you can only get from the park, and Disney Crocs. We live in a retirement town near reservations in the valley, so not many 5'9" blonde girls decked out in Disney here. Plus, the girl I saw basically disappeared into thin air. So even if it was someone who looked like her, it was still weird as hell. I left my home driving to work. I took my usual route, which is Grouse Flats Road. We are out in an isolated area where there's nothing but farm fields and woods. At approximately 5:40 a.m., I saw something in my headlights crossing the gravel road. It was a large, bulky figure, and as I got closer, I could see it was covered in a lot of hair. It appeared to be dark brown, taller than average height, and it moved at a quick pace. I only saw a side view, but it had a long arm moving in a very exaggerated way, not like how a person would move their arm. It never stopped to look at me or anything. It just kept moving. A few years ago in my previous home, I saw a strange apparition in the hallway by my son's room. It looked like a hazy, distorted image of a humanoid figure. I didn't think much of it at first and thought it was just my imagination. It occurred a few times. But then one day, I heard my son screaming and crying. The tone of his cry made it clear that something serious had happened. I ran into his room, and he was crying, saying that there was a big, scary man in his room scaring him. It was one of the weirdest and scariest moments of my life. I knew there was no one else in the house, but I could tell my son was truly terrified by whatever he had seen. My wife was with me when this happened. Afterward, she told me she had seen the same thing I had seen, but thought nothing of it. We had a spare bedroom near the kids' room where the grandparents stayed when they were in town. They also spoke of hearing footsteps at night and voices. I personally never experienced those, but that just made the whole situation even stranger. I am an Orthodox priest from Russia. In 2021, in the Crimea, in the mountains above Yalta, I personally saw Bigfoot. It was attracted by the sound of the whistle I was playing in the Yukach track. Bigfoot walked out to a rock located opposite me, to the west. I was on the east side of the gorge. There were about 300 meters between us. It looked tall, strikingly taller than a man, with a massive body and shoulders, long arms, and long legs. When I took out my camera to photograph him, he went up the slope with huge steps of about 2 meters. When I photographed the place where he had stood, all the pictures were overexposed. My Canon EOS 5D Mark II let me down for the first time. Such is the short story of my second and most vivid encounter with Bigfoot. About 15 years ago, one night I was at a friend's house out in the country in Vesper, Wisconsin, when my friend's car came rushing up the driveway and screeched to a halt. 2 of my other friends jumped out. They explained that they had seen something they just couldn't describe. I asked them if they got a good look at whatever had them so shaken. They looked at each other and said yes. They said they were driving through the country on their way to join us and were driving past a farm when they noticed something in the ditch. The friend who was driving said he flashed his brights to get a better look, and whatever it was raised up and ran across the road on all 4s. It looked like it could walk on 2 legs if it wanted to. They said it looked like it was half dog, half man, or maybe half dog, half monkey. They couldn't explain it any better than that. They just kept trying to compare it to other animals. They said they were about 20 yards from it, with the brights on, and they got a good look. I'll never forget how stricken their faces were with panic and fear. I don't think they were lying. This happened somewhere between 2007 and 2011, summer or fall. Clear sky with a full moon, if I remember right. It wasn't too long after sunset. My friend and I were walking through a cemetery on the edge of town. As we were walking down the main lane through the cemetery, something came running from the gate and passed us on our left. My friend laughed and asked if I had heard that. I stopped walking and responded no, but I had seen it. As the thing passed between headstones, I caught a look. It looked like a pale, emaciated humanoid running on all 4s. It had no hair at all that I could see. I didn't get a look at the face, but it moved far faster than any person running on hands and feet should be able to. My friend and I just froze and waited for another friend to come get us because we were too scared to move. It continued to circle us. We could hear it moving around. It never seemed threatening. If anything, it seemed curious, maybe scared of us. Who knows? I do know it was not a coyote or a stray dog. I never saw the face, but I did see the head. It did not have a muzzle. There was no tail either. It definitely didn't have fur. It had pale, almost bluish skin, and I remember being able to make out the ribs from where I was standing. Forgive me if this is a hot mess of a post. I was up all night researching this thing. When I did fall asleep, I didn't sleep well. I was driving down the highway one night around 3 a.m., heading home from work. Usually, I would only pass one car every few minutes. As usual, I saw lone headlights coming over the hill toward me on the other side of the highway. As they got within about 300 yards, they abruptly turned almost at a 90-degree angle toward the woods. I was confused at first, thinking it was a wild teenager taking an exit at high speed. Then the headlights came bulleting out of the woods, straight over the highway and toward me. I slammed the brakes. The car flipped, spun around upside down, and landed against the guardrail on my right. I had stopped at this point and ran out to help. A man, bloody, crawled out of his upside-down car, and all he said was, "Don't call the police." He pulled himself over the guardrail and stumbled down toward the tree line and disappeared. So I got in my car and went home. When I was still in elementary school, my family and I used to spend all summer at my great-uncle's house. We all slept in the same room, except for my sister, who'd sleep on a bed in the living room, and my great-uncle, who had his own room. That day had been pretty normal. We went to the beach, ate some pizza, and then around 10 p.m., we all went to sleep. Around 4 a.m., I suddenly woke up because someone was throwing things around in the kitchen, plastic cups, containers, food, etc. The door was open so I could see the light coming from the kitchen. When I'd had enough of the noise, I got up from bed. At first, something seemed off. I thought I was having a strange dream. As any rational kid would do, I tried to see if I could firebend. Who wouldn't want to firebend, right? I couldn't. I wasn't dreaming. My father wasn't in his bed, but I didn't care much, thinking maybe he was in the bathroom. My great-uncle was fairly old and had trouble sleeping, so I figured he had just gone into the kitchen to get something. "Uncle? Uncle, are you all right?" "All this noise woke me up," I said as I walked toward the kitchen. To my surprise, the room was empty, but the light was on and the fridge was open, with a can of Coke lying in front of it. I looked up to the shelf that was to my right and saw what was making the noise. Some sort of short creature around 30 centimeters tall. A gnome, you'd say, was looking at me, terrified. He was terrified because I saw him. I thought to myself, he's going to hurt me. Better if I fake a faint. And so I did. After a couple of seconds, I opened my eyes and saw that I wasn't on the kitchen floor anymore. I was in a strange, colorful tunnel. I got scared again and closed my eyes one more time. After a minute, though it felt like an eternity, I reopened them and found I was lying in my bed. There were still sounds coming from the kitchen, but I was scared and just waited for them to stop. Before sunrise, they did. That wasn't the only encounter I had with that creature, but I never saw it again. I would normally hear him, but I was far too scared to try and see him again. I don't know what he was doing exactly, but I'm sure I wasn't supposed to see him. I know it sounds crazy, but feel free to ask me anything about it. I grew up in southern Georgia, in the woods and swamps, hunting and hanging out daily. Fast forward 20 years. I'm on my leased hunting property near Whitmire, South Carolina. I found it strange that the old guys in the club would never ever hunt alone in these woods. I normally carry a .30-06 rifle while in the woods. One evening, it was getting late, 20 minutes or so before dark. I was watching some small ponds sitting over a road in the tall pines. I'm in my climber, maybe 10 feet or so up in the tree. I love the woods but hate heights. The woods were loud, then suddenly very quiet. I thought, okay, I was just hoping for a big buck. The next thing I hear is someone walking toward me in the small ponds, but then they just stop. It's getting really dark. I start hearing deep groans from where the walking had stopped. I thought it might be a bear or a big cat, rare in that area. Bears that far south are uncommon. It gets very quiet again. I could see the small road well in the moonlight. The groans were now directly under me, almost beside me. They were becoming growls. The odor was overwhelming, like a dead animal. I thought some stinky creature was climbing my tree. I felt like I was going to be grabbed. I started moving, trying to point my gun downward and lift my feet. I was shaking. I could hear heavy breathing. I yelled, "If you're a club member trespassing, I don't care. Just identify yourself or I'm going to start shooting." I thought someone was trying to get me in the tree stand. I never heard another sound, and the foul odor was gone. I put my gun on my back and started climbing down. No more than 2 or 3 steps down, I smelled that awful odor again. Then I heard a low groan right in front of my face. It was so dark I saw nothing. I was so scared I jumped off the tree in the opposite direction. When I hit the ground, I rolled, jumped to my feet, and ran down to the road. I sprinted to the gravel road where I could see well in the moonlight. I remembered my buddy was down at the bottom of the road in the small pines in a big box stand. I didn't see his light, so I ran down the road to the river where he was. When I reached him, he said, "Man, there's some weird stuff going down. We need to go." We slowly walked together back toward the gravel road. I heard someone walking on both sides of us the whole way. I think my buddy heard it too. We didn't speak the entire walk, maybe 500 or 600 yards. For some reason, I didn't feel like my gun would help. I had yelled earlier, threatening to shoot, and whoever, or whatever it wasn't scared. When we got to the gravel road, the atmosphere changed. It was almost 11 o'clock at night by then. My buddy didn't talk much. We went back to camp, had some food, and went to bed. I could hear him tossing and turning all night. I didn't sleep at all. When I was about 7 or 8, I had a disturbing encounter with some kind of creature or entity. I lived in the Appalachian Mountains in Pennsylvania. It was November, around the time daylight saving time ended. I remember it was supposed to be a school day, but the snow was so heavy the buses couldn't get through, so school was canceled. I was excited to spend the day outside in the snow. We had an acre of property that stretched far back into the woods. I walked deep into the forest to a small frozen pond past our property line. Suddenly, the woods went dead silent. No birds, no wildlife, absolutely nothing. It felt strange, but I kept going. I should have turned back, but I was just a naive little kid. When I reached the pond, the silence persisted. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I felt scared for no reason. I sensed something bad was going to happen if I didn't leave immediately. So I ran back home. When I reached the backyard, I saw the sun was setting. My mom came running outside, asking where I had been all day, and told me never to disappear like that again. But none of it made sense. I had only been outside for what felt like 20 minutes. I had left the house around 10 a.m. with all my snow gear. It was now almost 8 p.m. I had somehow been gone for 10 hours, and I have no idea how. I didn't see anything strange. I didn't hit my head. I didn't lose track of time. What happened? I've always dreamed of living in a small town with friendly neighbors and a cozy house. So when I got a job offer in a picturesque town in the middle of nowhere, I jumped at the chance. I found a charming little house on the outskirts of town and moved in without a second thought. At first, everything seemed perfect. The house was just what I wanted. The neighbors were friendly, and the town had a quaint charm I couldn't resist. But soon, strange things started happening. Objects moved on their own. Strange noises woke me up at night. I saw ghostly figures in the shadows. I brushed it off as my imagination until one night I woke up to find a group of Native American spirits at the foot of my bed. They looked angry and vengeful. I asked what they wanted, but they just stood there. When I covered my face with a blanket, they disappeared. The next morning, I researched the house and discovered it had been built on a sacred Native American burial ground. The spirits were angry their resting place had been disturbed. I called the local park ranger, a friendly guy who knew a lot about the area. He performed a ritual to banish the spirits. I felt a sense of relief as they faded away, but it was short-lived. As the ranger left, I began to shake. I called to him with my last breath. He rushed back in to find me lying on the ground, my body twisted unnaturally. I realized in horror I was dying. The local newspaper reported that the park ranger had unintentionally killed a young woman during the ritual. He was arrested, suspected of murder. No one knew he was trying to help. Grief and guilt consumed him. In the end, he took his own life. I was once assigned to escort a group of scientists into a remote part of the park to study a rare plant with supposed medical properties. The plant had crimson coloring and sharp thorns, and it caused hallucinations. The forest around us grew quiet and the animals vanished. Then the screaming started, inhuman and horrifying. One by one, the scientists vanished. Eventually, we realized we were being hunted by a creature that didn't want its secrets uncovered. On the final night, the plant emitted a humming sound. While the others were drawn to it, I knew we had to escape. The creature attacked, massive, glowing eyes, sharp claws. I grabbed the plant and ran. Somehow, I made it back to civilization. The plant was studied and found to have mind-altering effects. It was eventually destroyed, and the area was sealed off. The others never made it back. I'm haunted by what I saw. And then there's Gallup. A few friends and I were traveling on I-40 and stopped in Gallup to fill up the gas tank. As we waited in the turning lane, we saw someone cross in front of our vehicle. They wore a hoodie with the hood tightly secured. When they turned to look at us, the face wasn't human. Long, pointy chin, small nose, and big elongated eyes. We freaked out. As it ran away, we tried to follow, but within seconds, it vanished. Was it an alien? A shapeshifter? A skinwalker? I want to return to Gallup soon and spend a few nights to find clarity. New Mexico is a mystical place, and this was just one of many strange experiences we've had while passing through. Thanks for listening, cowboys and cowgirls. Hope you enjoyed these stories. Tomorrow, we dive deep into the horror of the American countryside. See you then. Merle. It took place in March or April of 2014. A friend and I had just been to the movies and were walking around late at night. Around 10:45 p.m., we decided to take a shortcut through the yard of our old school, which had since been abandoned and was in pretty bad shape. As we walked through the schoolyard, we decided to try getting inside the building to explore a little. The school consisted of 2 wings, so the building formed an L shape if viewed from above. It was 3 stories tall and had 3 entrances. The main entrance led into a central hall that connected the 2 wings. Each wing had staircases at both ends of the corridors, which led to the different floors. This is important later. One of the windows near the entrance to the lower wing was actually wide open, so we could easily climb in. We were now in the basement. We used our cell phones as flashlights, making sure not to point them toward the windows to avoid being seen. Even though the building wasn't in use, there was still a lot of stuff left behind: musical equipment, uniforms, a pool table, chairs, etc. We explored each room in the basement to see if we could find anything interesting. After about 15 minutes in the basement, we headed up to the first floor and entered the main hall. A tarp or large plastic sheet was hanging there, seemingly to separate the hall from the lower wing. I assumed it was related to some kind of construction work. We went down one of the corridors and started exploring the classrooms. Each classroom had either been vandalized or suffered water damage, so everything was in a pretty broken and rotting state. In hindsight, I think we were lucky the floors didn't collapse under us. We had just come out of the 3rd classroom and were standing in the corridor when we heard someone moving the tarp or plastic sheet in the main hall. This wasn't the wind. We could definitely tell someone was physically moving it. We also heard footsteps, but the rhythm was odd, like someone was changing their walking pace erratically. We immediately ducked into a classroom to hide, thinking someone might have called security on us. We hid behind the door, dead silent, for about 2 minutes. When we didn't hear anything else, we figured it was just the wind or some random noise. We decided to keep going. We moved through the corridor and went up the stairs at the opposite end of the hall to explore the 2nd floor. While we were up there, we occasionally heard noises, but we brushed them off as wind. Eventually, we had explored the entire corridor and decided to walk down the staircase that led from the 2nd floor to the hall. Halfway down the staircase, there was a landing, and this is where things took a turn, no pun intended. From that landing, we could see the plastic sheet, and it was moving. We also heard a scratching noise. We stood there for a moment, just listening. I decided to peek around the corner to see what was making the sound. What I saw scared the living crap out of me. It was some kind of creature. It was skinny, almost completely naked, no clothes that I could see. It had really thin strands of hair and was extremely pale, like corpse pale, almost completely white. The first thing that came to mind was that it looked like Gollum, just bigger. It was crouched down, scratching the floor or something, making weird growly, groany, breathy noises. It was facing away from us, so I stood frozen, watching it for a while. Then I took a step back and just pointed at it, looking at my friend. He peeked around the corner and immediately his facial expression changed into a mix of horror and shock. That was oddly reassuring. It meant he saw it too. We stood there for maybe 20 seconds, just watching this thing do whatever it was doing. Then, like in the most cliché horror movie ever, my friend started backing away slowly and accidentally stepped on a piece of glass, which cracked loudly. The creature snapped its head over its shoulder and looked directly at me. I bolted. We ran all the way down to the basement to get out. The whole way, I swear it felt like it was right behind us. We finally got back to my friend's house and had a kind of debriefing session, making sure we both saw the same thing. The closest thing to a reference image I've found looks pretty much exactly like it, just with thin strands of hair on its head. I understand if you think I'm lying. I'd be skeptical too if someone told me this. But I swear this actually happened, and my friend confirms it to this day. We got a good enough look at it to confirm that it was a humanoid creature of some sort, but it didn't really resemble a human being. The only explanation I can think of is that it was a homeless person who for some reason was naked and living in the abandoned school. But this was in northern Norway. During winter, you wouldn't survive very long without clothes. Also, I live in a very small town with very few, if any, homeless people. So that theory doesn't really make sense. It could have been some kind of animal that found its way inside, but we got a good look at it, and it didn't resemble any animal I've ever seen. I have no idea what that thing was. Normally, I'm a rational Occam's razor kind of person, but we saw what we saw, and I have no explanation for it. I've been a park ranger for over a decade, and in that time, I've seen some incredible things. But nothing could have prepared me for the truth about what was really happening in the national park where I worked. It all started when I noticed that there had been an unusually high number of disappearances. Hikers, campers, even other park rangers vanished without a trace. Despite our best efforts, we couldn't find any clues. Then I started to notice something strange. My supervisor and some of my colleagues seemed to be hiding something from me. They spoke in hushed tones when I was around, and I could tell they were keeping information from me. Finally, I confronted my supervisor and demanded to know what was going on. That's when he revealed the truth. There were unknown predators in the park, creatures preying on hikers, campers, and even rangers. I was shocked and horrified. But what really terrified me was that my colleagues had known about it and said nothing. How long had they known? Why hadn't they warned people or taken action? I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I went to the media and shared what I had learned. But instead of being praised for my bravery, I was fired. Now I'm on the run, pursued by the very people I once worked alongside. But I won't stop until the truth is exposed and the innocent people who vanished in the park get the answers they deserve. When I was 19, I worked as a stalker for Target and had to bike to work early every morning, around 4 a.m. Worst job ever. One morning, I got on my bike and began pedaling the 5 miles like usual. After a while, I got the weirdest feeling, like something was following me. I can't explain it any better than that. It was like a sixth sense. But here's the kicker. I could feel that whatever was following me was doing so from the air, behind me, and up in the sky. My heartbeat quickened. I pedaled faster. Movies started flashing through my mind. Jeepers Creepers, The Lost Boys, Interview with a Vampire, anything with a flying monster attacking from above. I expected my rational brain to kick in and calm me down, like it usually did when I was spooked. But it didn't. The feeling kept getting stronger. I became convinced that something was up there, getting closer. My vision started to blur while my hearing became razor sharp. My body was switching from one survival mode to another. My back felt as sensitive as my palms. Finally, I got the courage to look behind me. Nothing. I kept pedaling. Looked again. There was something there. I couldn't tell what. It was dark, maybe 100 feet up, but it was following me. Now I was panicking. My body basically shut down higher thinking and switched to pure instinct. I remember thinking of those Discovery Channel shows where the gazelle runs from the lion. I was the gazelle. I was simply waiting for whatever it was to land on me. But I eventually burst into a well-lit intersection and started heading downhill toward target. And just like that, the feeling lifted. I looked around, looked up, nothing. Everything was fine. I don't know what happened that morning 11 years ago, but I remember almost every second of it. My name is Dakota, and I am a Native American member of the Ojibwe tribe. I grew up on the reservation, surrounded by the dense forests of the North Woods. But the woods were never as terrifying as the night I had an encounter with an unknown predator. It was a chilly autumn evening, and I was walking home after a long day of fishing. I had just reached the edge of the woods when I heard a strange sound behind me. I turned and saw a creature like nothing I had ever seen before. It was tall and thin, with glowing eyes and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. Its fur was matted and dirty. Its breath smelled of death. I tried to run, but it was too fast. It chased me through the woods, its footsteps thunderous. I could feel its hot breath on my neck. I was sure I was about to die. Somehow I stumbled back to camp. My tribe saw the fear in my eyes and knew something was wrong. I told them what I'd seen, and they listened intently. Then I learned the truth. This was not the first sighting. Our tribe had encountered the predator before. Some said it was a wendigo. Others thought it was something even more sinister. We had tried to find it, but it always eluded us. As I recovered, I researched the creature. What I found shocked me. It wasn't natural. It was the result of a government experiment gone wrong. A blend of science and magic had created this thing. Now I am on a mission to stop it. I'm not alone. My tribe has joined forces with other Native communities. We know it won't be easy, but we are determined to protect our people. As we traveled deeper into the forest, the weight of the unknown pressed on us. Our weapons felt useless. Then suddenly, we heard a sound, something inhuman, and knew it was close. We readied ourselves, but the predator never appeared. We searched for hours, but it was gone, like it had vanished into thin air. Back at camp, the elders confirmed our fears. The government had been conducting secret experiments, trying to harness supernatural power. They had unleashed something they couldn't control. Now it roams free, a being of darkness and magic, beyond our understanding. We knew that we had to act fast if we were to stop it before it destroyed everything we held dear. The next day, we set out once more, this time armed with knowledge and determination. We knew we were up against something far greater than ourselves, but we also knew that we could not back down. We traveled deeper into the heart of the forest, guided by the magic of our ancestors. Finally, we found it. The creature stood before us, a being of pure darkness, a force of nature that defied all explanation. We fought with all our might, our weapons clashing against its inhuman form, but it was like fighting a shadow. It moved too fast, too fluidly, and we couldn't keep up. It was only through the power of our magic that we were finally able to drive it back, to send it back to whatever dark realm it had come from. We returned to our tribe, battered and bruised, but victorious, knowing that we had protected our land and our people from a force beyond our comprehension. Even as we celebrated, I knew the forest would never be the same again. The echoes of the unknown predator would haunt us for years to come. There were a group of loggers who, after a long day, settled around a fire. As they congregated, they found themselves feeling watched. Apparently someone or something was watching them from the tree line. Being loggers, they decided to ignore it until the loudest howl any of them had ever heard emanated into the campsite. Not knowing how near this canine was, they quickly made their way into their cabin. The cabin was a single-room log dwelling with bunk beds. The door was tall to accommodate axes over shoulders, about a 7-foot door with a small window 6 feet up. Now inside, the loggers began to discuss the oddity of having wolves so close to camp. Then they heard the howl again, this time right outside the cabin. None of them had a gun. They decided it was best to block the door and wait until sunrise to try to chase the wolves off. That's when they heard some guttural gibberish. The sound was close to words, but not quite. It moved around the cabin until it reached the door. In the window, they saw the face of a very large dog-like creature peering at them. Immediately, some of the loggers began to pray, while others were too shocked by the sight of the massive canine head. The creature apparently retreated by morning, but they found no signs of wolves, only some very large paw prints around the cabin. The prints suggested that the beast was bipedal. From what I can gather, the story originated in the forests east of Traverse City, Michigan, sometime in the early 1970s. There was another account from the area around the Ottawa National Forest in the Upper Peninsula at about the same time. Now let me begin by telling you where I'm from. I'm from Northeast India, a very quiet, lovely place full of nature and far from the more eccentric parts of the country. The creature in my story is called Kibukiahiba. In my tribe's language, it means half man, half tiger, or more precisely, man-like tiger. Quite similar to the skinwalker, eh? My tribe is the Mite tribe of the state of Manipur. There are several states in Northeast India, each with multiple tribes. Some may or may not have this mythological creature in their folklore, but this is one of the most famous stories in ours. The best-known version is the tale of Kibukiahiba and the 7 brothers and 1 sister. Would you like to hear that story? Let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to share it or even link you to an animated video someone from our state created. That video tells the story just as it was told to us when we were children, and it is eerily similar to the Navajo legend, though in our version, the creature is a single man beast rather than a group. He was a famous medicine man who discovered dark magic that allowed him to transform into a tiger-like beast and back again. I've also heard that people in Thailand, Myanmar, and a few other Southeast Asian countries have similar stories with different twists. That would make sense, since in our version, the creature is chased away to the south, possibly to those regions. Now that I know skinwalker legends exist in the West, I feel like my story offers a whole new perspective on its presence and how widespread this phenomenon might be. Whether it's truly global or tied to a common thread of dark magic that crosses cultures and continents. I've been a park ranger for over a decade, and I've spent countless hours in the woods, but nothing could have prepared me for what I encountered that day. I was out on a routine patrol when my radio suddenly went dead. I tried to retrace my steps back to camp, but the dense forest made it impossible. As the sun began to set, I realized I was lost. Panic set in, no food, no water, and the temperature was dropping. Then I heard something rustling in the bushes ahead. I froze. After a few tense moments, a massive creature emerged. It towered over me on 2 legs, fur as black as midnight, and glowing eyes. It growled low, and I knew I was in danger. It lunged, claws slashing. I dodged the first attack, but it chased me relentlessly. I thought I was going to die until I saw a faint light in the distance, a ranger station. With all the strength I had, I ran. The creature slowed as I got closer. I burst through the door and slammed it shut behind me. I was alive. I couldn't stop thinking about that creature. I knew no one would believe me, but I had to warn others. I'll never forget the terror, but also the strength that helped me survive. When I was 10, about 16 years ago, I saw something strange in my house. It was around 8 p.m. My parents weren't home, and we had no pets. I opened the front door, and through the hallway window, I saw a long, skinny creature standing in our living room. It had no hair, no clothes, almost like a living shadow. It stood on two legs, had two arms, and was so tall it had to crouch slightly to fit inside. It didn't have visible eyes, but I felt it staring at me. I turned and ran. I heard something crack behind me, but didn't look back. I hid in a bush about 100 meters away. After 30 minutes, I crept back. There was no sign of it, only a cracked porcelain lamp on the floor. Years later, I visited my parents and found shards of that same lamp in a plastic bag at the back of a wardrobe. When I asked, they said it broke long ago, but didn't remember how. To this day, I don't know what I saw or what it wanted. This happened just before winter break of my freshman year at a small college in rural western Pennsylvania. A friend and I went to smoke weed in a clearing past the parking lot. It was cold and silent that night. We had just started smoking from a bag we'd used before. I took one hit, looked up to exhale, and saw it, a humanoid face in the trees. Pale, bald, no hair or ears. Its big, dark eyes reflected the distant parking lot lights. It had a hand wrapped around a branch, long fingers, a narrow thumb tipped with a sharp nail. As the smoke cleared, I saw it more clearly. I tapped my friend. He saw it too. Then it backed away silently. That calm moment vanished, replaced by intense fear. We ran. My friend stuffed the still smoking bowl in his coat, dropped the lighter. When we returned the next day, we found the lighter standing upright on the log. The branch it had gripped was 10 to 12 feet off the ground. Leaves were disturbed beneath the tree, and there were a few shallow holes. My friend, a biology major and Eagle Scout, couldn't explain them. We never went back after dark. I think we saw a crawler. Make of it what you will. This happened late last night. I'm a programmer and often work late, so I took a walk to clear my head. It was midsummer, moonlit. On the edge of town, near a river embankment, I saw something in a paddock. At first, I thought it was a horse until I saw sheep huddled in a corner and realized how large the creature truly was. I crouched behind some plastic near the footpath, but it had already seen me. It stepped toward me quickly, then sat and stared. After 10 minutes, it ran toward the river, silent. I backtracked home, but I think I saw it again out of the corner of my eye. It was a dull pink color, like overboiled meat, with sunken eyes and a wide, lipless mouth. Not bony, but wrinkled and smooth. It ran on its feet, but used its hands to steady itself. When it was near, everything went quiet. No animals, no river sounds. I couldn't even hear my own breathing. Has anyone else seen something like this?